let me call to order this meeting of the City of Bloomington Plan Commission for December 14th, 2020. We do have 3 petitions on the agenda this evening. I'll just give a brief overview of the agenda. We'll have some internal business to take care of, and then 3 petitions in the order of PUD 17-20, McDowell Business Center LLC, followed by ZO 2320, Bill C. Brown Revocable Trust, and finally ZO 2520, Bill C. Brown Trustee, the petitioner on that one. So why don't we start with calling the roll?
Great. Let's see, Burrell.
Here.
Herrera.
Here.
Sandberg.
Here.
Whistler.
Here.
St. John.
Here.
Copper.
Here.
Kinsey.
Here.
Cockrum.
Here.
And Kate. I think she is going to be joining us late.
Yeah, she said she would be here, but a few minutes late. All right, so we do have some minutes for approval. The minutes from our October 2020 meeting were included in the packet. Are there any questions, corrections, or suggestions for those minutes, or a motion to approve those minutes?
I would move approval.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the October 2020 meeting minutes, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay? Okay, minutes are approved. We'll move on now to reports, resolutions, and communications. I know we have a couple of things that are specifically mentioned on the agenda. Before we get to those, anything else, Jackie, from staff?
Not that I know of. Director Robinson is here, so he may chime in, but I think the only announcement, or the only ones that we have, are those that are listed.
All right. Well, let's go to the first of those then. We do need to appoint a hearing officer.
Yes.
And
so I can speak to that a little bit. A hearing officer sees petitions that would otherwise go to the Board of Zoning Appeals if they are simple, pretty cut and dry, and the hearing officer is a member of staff. We need to appoint a hearing officer alternate because Mr. Robinson was our hearing officer alternate. So as the director now, it doesn't quite make sense for him to hold that position. I believe this will then only be for this month, and we'll have to readdress all positions again in January, but we just wanted to fill the position. We have a staff person named Carina Pazos, and she is a planner by trade, but I mean a planner by education, but she also works on the engineering team, so has a good perspective from both sides of our department. And she has said that she would be interested and willing to serve as the hearing officer alternate.
all right. Would you tell us her name again?
Yes, her name is Carina Pazos.
Carina Pazos. All right. Well, unless there are any other suggestions, I think this would be an appropriate time for someone to nominate Carina Pazos to be the hearing officer alternate.
I would be happy to nominate Carina Pazos.
Second.
All right. We have a nomination and a second. Any discussion on that? Comments or questions? Okay, well, let's call the roll then on appointing Carina Pazos as hearing officer alternate.
Perfect, thank you. Herrera,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
St. John.
Yeah.
Copper,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
Cockrum,
Yes.
and Burrell.
Yes.
8-0, thank you.
All right. Congratulations. We have one other item here to take action on. This is the sign fee amendment, which we have extended, I think, once before, but I believe it looks like
Yes.
Mike Rucker's here. Do you want to speak to this this amendment, Mike?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Brad. Just very quickly, I think the commission is now familiar with these sign fee waivers. Back on June 8th and then again on September 14th of this year, the Plan Commission exercised its authority under the UDO to temporarily waive sign application fees for temporary and permanent signs. That was part of a package of measures, including pickup drop-off zones, parklets, and some temporary road closures that were put into place by the City Council. The City Council is going to be considering an extension of those measures now through August 6th of 2021. And so we have also come to the Plan Commission to request a similar extension of the sign fee application waivers through that date. If you have any questions about the program, I do believe Kaisa Goodman is also on the call from ESD. ESD has been taking the lead with the business community on these measures if you do want additional details. And if you need additional details from me, I'm happy to provide them, but I feel sort of like you guys are getting sick of hearing about this every 3 months at this point. So,
Is there anything new in this, or is this just simply another extension of the exact same program as it was 3 months ago?
there is nothing new from the Plan Commission's perspective here. It's just an extension. Obviously, you know, the pandemic has not slowed down at this point in time. We're hopeful that with the news related to vaccines that we will see a change at some point in the coming months, but that is not a reality yet.
All right. Are there any questions from commissioners on this this request? All right. If not, would someone like to make a motion? I think the request is just that we would move to extend the waiver of sign application fees through August 6th, 2021.
I would move approval as stated by Commissioner Whistler.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Jackie, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Whistler,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Copper,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
Cochran,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
and Sandberg.
Yes.
8-0. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other reports or communications from staff?
I don't think we have any other official communications. I will just say that we will be doing our appointments as well in January, not just the hearing officer appointment, but those on the board, on the commissions and boards that this body helps to fill. So please do be thinking about that. I will send out an email reminder about what those are. If people might be interested in either filling the same roles or taking on something new next year. We appreciate all you do and hope you'll give that some consideration. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Are there any other reports or communications from commissioners? All right. Seeing none, we are on to our petitions. First up, we have PUD 17-20. Petitioner is McDole Business Center, LLC. Property is located at 300 West Hillside Drive. The request is an amendment to the preliminary plan and district ordinance for the Thompson PUD to allow 88 multifamily dwelling units and 21 single-family lots on parcel E. Eric Grulich is the case manager. And Eric, are you with us?
I think so, yes.
We got you.
Commissioner Whistler.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner
Yes.
Cochran.
And I will need to recuse myself from this conversation as the petitioner is a client of mine. So I will just ask that someone text me when the conversation's over and I'd be happy to rejoin the meeting.
All right. Yes. Thank you for that Commissioner Cochran. All right, Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So this is a request for the McDowell Business Center. This is a roughly 100,000 square foot warehouse that is located along the Switchyard Park. So this is part of the Thompson PUD. The site's been developed with a large warehouse. And so the petitioners are coming forward today. This is the second hearing for this petition. It was last heard in August. Planning Commission expressed some concerns to the petitioner about the site plan and some overall guidance. The petitioner has been working on some changes to the petition, and so they're coming back for their second hearing here tonight. So what they're requesting now is an amendment to the preliminary plan and the district ordinance for the Thompson PUD to allow for 19 townhomes and 104 multifamily residences on this parcel. So as I mentioned, this was last heard by the Planning Commission in August. So on the screen in front of you is the previous petition that was proposed for this site. It featured a mix of single-family houses, as well as two multifamily mixed-use buildings on the north and south end of the property. The Planning Commission and staff expressed a lot of concern about the land uses within the proposed plan. So as I mentioned, the petitioner has been working on revising the site plan based on those comments that they've heard. And they've revised the preliminary plan for this site. So they are coming forward now with a slightly different product. And what they are showing now is a series of townhome buildings on the north side of the site. These are proposed to be owner occupied and consist of 19 townhomes and 4 separate buildings. There would be a rain garden between these. It's kind of a courtyard with 2 connections to the Switchyard Park to the east of this. Moving to the south, you've got 2 4- and 5-story multifamily mixed-use buildings. The southern building would be a 5-story building, ground floor commercial, apartments above with some parking on the ground floor as well. Just to the south of that, there's another mixed-use building. This would be a 4-story building, again with some ground floor commercial and some parking with residences above that. This site is accessed only from Hillside Drive. So Hillside Drive connects to Rogers Street and stubs into the Switchyard Park. So that is the only public egress and ingress to this site. So the petitioners are showing a parking area that accesses Hillside Drive. This would be a 2-way access. If the Planning Commission remembers, the previous site plan had this drive going underneath the building, which the fire department had a lot of problems with. So the petitioners revised the site plan so that they don't have the entrance going underneath the building. The drive aisle is 24 feet wide in order to facilitate fire department vehicles. A roundabout has been shown in the center of this, again, to facilitate fire department vehicles entering and exiting the site. And so they've also stubbed this parking area and driveway to the north, where it's currently been developed with a mini storage warehouse. So the parking area has been stubbed for the hopes that if that property to the north redevelops, that this parking area can be extended all the way to Grind Street to the north. So the petitioner also owns another property on the south side of Hillside Drive. So this is where they are proposing another building that would be completely residential with 2 floors of parking on the bottom floor with apartments above that. So another couple more features of the project. The petitioner has committed that the mixed-use buildings on this would be buildings 1, 2, and 7, would be designed to the Silver LEED standards. The townhomes would also be designed to meet a residential LEED requirement. Each of these buildings would also feature at least 15% of the units set aside as affordable housing. That is something that is required by the zoning code for a planned unit development. So each of these buildings would have affordable units within them. So one of the things that we've been discussing and working on with this petition many times, especially was discussed with the last hearing, was how this project and this property and the buildings interact with the Switchyard Park, which fronts along a majority of this frontage. So I'm just going to kind of step through some of the elevations so you can see what the buildings look like, how they're going to kind of interact, and then I'll talk about some of the concerns that the department still has. So this is an overall rendering of the petition. On the bottom of the screen is the south side of the site. This would be the residential building south of Hillside Drive. Again, this would have the bottom 2 floors as parking, with the upper 3 floors being used as residences. To the north of this, you can see one of the mixed-use buildings that has the curved kind of corner, the southeast corner. This would be one of the mixed-use buildings with the commercial space on that southeast corner, with apartments above that. So this is kind of showing the northern portion of the site again. As I mentioned, the mixed-use building on the south side. Moving to the north of that is the second mixed-use building. Again, you can see how it has a predominant entrance facing the Switchyard Park, ground floor commercial space with apartments above. So one of the things that we talked about at the previous hearing was a study that was done for this property that a consultant performed last year that had buildings kind of a 4-story along the front, along the Switchyard Park, that kind of increased in height as you moved further back from the Switchyard Park. So the petitioner has incorporated that design here with the 4-story front, with the 5-story further back from the trail to help provide a better aesthetic along the trail. So one of the things I just want to point out while we're looking at this elevation is you can see both of the mixed-use buildings have predominant entrances facing the trail. Very, very good attention to detail along the trail side facades of the building. So that's something that we certainly want to highlight as a major benefit, and something we find as a good attribute of those 2 buildings. But it's something that we want to kind of look at a little bit closer with the townhome buildings that are shown on the north side of the site. So this rendering is looking south. In the foreground here, you can see the 4 townhome buildings. So they have specific awnings that are shown along the fronts of those buildings, and entrances. Sorry, I'm kind of moving fast here. So these are the townhome buildings. Again, as I mentioned, the awnings, the entrances are kind of tucked back along the corner of the buildings. So the facades of these buildings facing the trail is one of the things that still causes us some concern about this project. As we've mentioned in the past, this is a very unique location. There are not many properties along the Switchyard Trail that provide an opportunity for redevelopment, that have a tremendous amount of frontage and view from the trail. So we really want to make sure that we're paying a lot of detail to the buildings that face the trail, promoting pedestrian interaction, promoting high levels of architectural detail for all of the buildings. So while we are, satisfied with the 2 buildings that are on the south end of the site, the mixed-use buildings, it's the townhome buildings that we really feel still need some additional attention to detail. So as I mentioned in the staff report, the petitioner did revise one of the elevations for the townhome buildings. This was after the revision deadline. They did show some balconies and patios along the front, which we feel like is a slight improvement to the buildings and moving a little bit more forward in the direction that we want. We still want to hopefully try to get a little bit better detail regarding those pedestrian entrances, make them a little bit more predominant, not kind of tucked back. We want them to look and feel like a front, so that it's not just the sides of the building that you're seeing from the trail. So those are kind of the concerns with the townhome buildings, is improving that view from the Switchyard Park. One of the other concerns that we have is regarding the building south of Hillside Drive. This is the building on the south end of the site, on the left side of the screen. As I mentioned, the bottom 2 floors of this are a parking garage, which really does not promote any pedestrian-friendly view or interaction. Granted, it is set back further from the Switchyard Park. However, we feel we could certainly make some improvements to that building facade. Possibly something mirroring the building just to the north of that has that curved entrance that kind of draws your eye to that corner of the building, creates some detail and interest. So we'd like to try to get a little bit better improvements for the aesthetics for that building on the south side of the site. So as I mentioned, there was a consultant plan that was drawn up for this site that you can see on this site, on this slide right here. It has buildings 3, 4-story in scale, kind of stepping back from the trail, which the petitioner has made great strides in improving the site plan to better mirror that study that was done. So we certainly are very encouraged by that change in the site plan. However, as I mentioned, we do want to see some improvements for the townhome buildings, for the portions of those buildings that are facing the trail. In addition, there were some improvements to the district ordinance that needed to be done in order to outline the specific standards that will be governing this. So with this request, the Plan Commission is approving that district ordinance. So we need to make sure that that specifically outlines the standards that are being held to this petition, setbacks, impervious surface coverage, things like that. So we need to make sure that that is spelled out and nailed down. So we are recommending that the Plan Commission forward this petition or continue this petition to the January 11th hearing. And we certainly welcome and are looking for any comments regarding some of the details that I've outlined in the presentation regarding the townhomes and the building along the south, as well as any other comments regarding the site plan and elevations in general. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Eric. Is there a representative of the petitioner who would like to make a presentation or add anything to the presentation?
So Doug Bruce is here from the petitioner.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you, Doug.
Okay. Hello. So I'm sitting here with our civil engineer and my client, and we've, as you've seen, we've made quite a few changes from the initial plan. You know, we really, what this is really about is that we are wanting to make an amendment to the PUD for a use for residential and commercial use. We've kind of gone down the road of basically designing all of the architecture, but the real request right now is to again, Jeff, what was it? We weren't
land use for residential.
Yeah, just basically a land use for residential and commercial. We've kind of found ourselves basically designing all the architecture at the same time. And again, from the first hearing, I think we've listened. We've certainly made quite a few changes. A bit of our timeline for us, just to share with the members of the Plan Commission on what has happened in this project, so that you can understand why we are where we are at now, and maybe why there is some confusion on some of the things we've either been asked to do or why maybe we haven't done them, is that back in 2015, we actually had a meeting with the mayor, a different developer and housing hand and planning in the mayor's office, and discussed this project. And that developer at that time was pushing somewhere a development on this site of around 700 bedrooms. And those were all 5- and 6-story buildings. And we were pretty well told that that wasn't going to happen, and that this site, the mayor did not want to see this park next to, didn't want it to feel like it was downtown. So that project, it was too tall, not enough commercial. And at that meeting, we saw a plan that the city had done that wasn't a public plan. I call it City Plan Number 1. And that plan basically had single-family homes on this site, on the entire site, and it had connecting roads. And that's kind of where the project said. It just died in 2015. Nothing was ever filed. The numbers never worked, and the project just went away. In November, December of 2019, about this same time last year, after recalling the city plan that we had seen, we started to look at how could we make this single-family homes on this site and integrate with the neighborhood. The hard part is that, and as Eric has pointed out, our only connector is Hillside Drive. It's a fantasy on that initial plan that we're going to have streets connecting to the west of us, because there are houses there, there are no streets, there's no alleys, there's no other connector. So we met with some of the executive board of McDowell neighborhood and showed them our site plan of just all single family homes. And at that time, they really liked it. So we moved forward and met with planning the spring of 2020, or I'll say early 2020, January, February. And then we were kind of told that, no, we want to see more density here. We need to see you add some density. So we added some apartment buildings on either end of the project and kind of went down that path. And then we filed in August, or filed in June, July, and we had our August hearing. And some people, I think, in the McDowell neighborhood were upset because we had gone away from the single family homes. And that's why I kind of wanted to bring this out, because that second plan that the city showed us by the park consultant now had, as Eric showed you a while ago, just basically 4 and 5 or 5 and 6 story buildings on the site, no single family homes. So after we had that first hearing, the change plan that you see in front of you now, we tried to accomplish a few things. First is that we tried to make a bigger buffer yard and parking as part of that buffer between any of the multi-story buildings and the few houses along the street there behind us, directly to the west of us. We tried to incorporate those into our site plan so you can at least see where those residential structures are. We also listened to the city fire and planning about going under the building. So we changed our site plan so that we could make a circular path around the site. We also looked at a possible connector, even though we have no control over the site to the north of us where Storage Express is. We have the possibility that if that site were to be redeveloped down the road, there is a way to connect to it, and then you would connect on out to Grimes. That's not anything that has been discussed, and it's, again, nothing that is in any sort of plan, but it was a request that was brought up at our first hearing with you back in, I think, August 10th. The other thing that we tried to do, again, was we've met the requirements that the current UDO has for affordable housing. We also wanted to look at, again, a different type of housing. We really wanted the single family homes here, but if the city administration wanted to see more density here, we wanted to come up with a way where we could appropriately mix these taller buildings with some other single family homes in a way and make them more affordable. And townhomes have become a way to build a structure that is less expensive than a single family home, because you've got shared party walls between them. They're basically looked at as condos, vertical condos in a way. These are 3-story buildings. And so we tried to come up with a way that it allowed the park into this neighborhood and this neighborhood into the park. So by turning these buildings and not having them along the B line, and our worry was if we turned them, not only did it reduce the number of this diversified housing that we're talking about adding to the city, but it also made for fewer units and then just put a big wall of units facing the park. At our earlier hearing in August, we had houses along the park, and there was some concern about porches and balconies overlooking the park. So the townhome structures you see now on this project we're not having doors or balconies facing the park. Now, we were just kind of found out last week at the last minute that, or 2 weeks ago, that, everything is looking good, but the townhome still needs some tweaking. And I guess part of my point here is that we've really tweaked everything, and I don't think it would take much for us to tweak the townhomes. As a matter of fact, we've taken the 2 end units on these buildings now and turned them and faced their front door and kind of a raised porch towards the Beeline Trail. But that's why we decided we wanted to hear this evening as well. We've been, we had our first hearing in August, and then we've either had issues, we need you to provide this, or we want you to provide that. So we've kind of been off in September, off in October, off in November. And the more time that goes on with this project has been not only stressful for the owner, but it's just been, to me, it's kind of gotten us away from the original request of what we're really trying to do is just amend the PUD to have residential and commercial allowed here, and then work on that approval process for what those buildings would be down the road. This, to me, was kind of our initial step, but we're kind of combining it all into one. So I wanted to just bring you up to date so you could see why you see the changes that you see. And part of that leads me to say, basically, I think we don't have any issues with making front doors and porches face the park either. But this has kind of put us where we are now. Jeff, do you want to?
Jeff Daniel, Vital Daniel Associates. What we're hoping to do is achieve a land use allowing the residential and commercial on this industrial PUD from the mid-90s. And we have the intent of showing the type of architecture we're planning, but we're not here to ask for a final site plan approval or architectural approval. What we'd like to do is get the land use issue settled, move on to city council, and if we get approval, then we'll come back and work with the staff and come up with acceptable architecture and acceptable site plan. That's what we're hoping to do tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions now for either staff or for the petitioner from commissioners?
I have one. I don't know
Go
if
ahead, Jillian.
Yeah, I appreciate the explanation here, the elaboration that the petitioner has just provided. And I wonder if Jackie or Eric staff could elaborate on what the process will be in terms of reviewing site plan. Should we do what I believe the petitioner is asking is at this point, they're seeking and the amendment on the land use. And I just want to make sure that we're very clear what the steps are that would follow a move like that.
Sure. So I can weigh in and then Eric can jump in and add or correct anything. Yes, so this is a request for rezone. So we do try when we come here to make that clear to you all, when sometimes we get a little bit further down the road, a little bit further into the weeds about details, and we say that's nice to discuss, but that's not what we're actually doing. So that is 100% accurate. We do try to avoid that. However, in this case and in other cases we've seen, lots of detail was presented. And what's a problem in this situation is that when you are amending the preliminary plan in order to add uses, you need to also propose development standards for those new uses that did not previously exist in the PUD. So there are not residential and commercial development standards proposed. So they can do that, and that's fine. But what typically happens in a PUD of this size, similar to what we saw in the Curry PUD, is that they know what they're going to build. So instead of detailing out, or in addition to detailing out some basic development standards, they say these are actually the exact development standards we think we're going to build on this site. And so that is kind of how this one has worked out. So whether or not, I think it's a sometimes confusing process. I think we've been, and Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, but from my perspective, we've been pretty clear that the interface with the B line is important and needs to be taken as a front for longer than 2 weeks. At this point, we just don't feel comfortable that the development standards that are in the existing PUD would get that. So either they can propose some along those lines or show us a design that does that as well. So for example, if you recommend approval with no conditions related to this specific issue, and it goes on to council and they approve it, then when they come back, it will be a confusing set of, there's no standards there to say what exactly, what are their parameters for building, because they have not said, and again, Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, but these are just examples, that our side yard setbacks will be X, that our maximum height is Y. Those things haven't been spelled out, because in a case like this, often what happens is the the drawing that they've showed you kind of stands in for that, or bolsters the basic development standards that they put in. Or they can identify a zone and say, we're going to build to the MC zoning district development standards. But none of that has been done. So we've been treating it, and so maybe we shouldn't have, we've been treating it as a case where someone's, like we did with the Curry PUD, where they knew what they wanted to build. And so those description of that development stood in as the development standards for what could come through. But yes, if they don't want it, agreed, this is a rezone and it's not marrying them to a design, but it is setting development standards in some way. And if they would rather do that in a list or as a narrative, that's fine too. We just need to get to that. We don't feel comfortable sending it on to council without that, or some sort of, there may be a way to craft some sort of condition, but because we actually felt that we were kind of repeatedly making it clear that that those buildings needed to be improved on the B line, and that wasn't happening, fully happening, that maybe it would make more sense to engage like our contract with Schmidt Associates and have a more professional opinion weigh in to get those ideas going. So that was kind of our intent to put it onto January. And we also wanted to note, that our plan commission rules and procedures are very ambiguous about whether or not we could have just continued this petition. And we could have, we've done that in the past. But we did want them to be able to come here and kind of explain, that, hey, we wanted you to see, they have been working on it. It is getting better. We do like the project. Just think there's this technicality of establishing development standards plus the improvement of the interface on the B line that are very important and need to get done. And we kind of thought that it would make more sense to bring that here to discuss as opposed to trying to continually discuss it with them without your input. And so Eric, feel free to chime in if I've said anything odd.
Eric, anything to add?
No, I think Jackie kind of synopsized that pretty well.
Okay. Any
Can I
other
ask a
questions?
question? Well, as a follow-up to that, I guess a question for the petitioner, which is, how do they prefer to proceed at this point? It sounds like there are a couple of options. One would be if they think there's, significantly more redesign they might want to do to set out standards and approach it simply as the rezone issue, but with a set of standards, versus what it sounded a little bit more like what we were hearing just now was there's additional tweaking, additional changes that might be able to be made based on the office's discussion of this particular design. So petitioners, what is your preference here?
Well, this is Doug Bruce. Part of what I would say is we did submit, there is a narrative in the packet, and there is a list of items and zoning, I'll say a similar zone that we are proposing to adopt and then make the following changes to make this site work. And so we have that in the packet. There is a list and there is that narrative. And I guess part of me says is that we have made the connections, and I think the architecture for the apartment buildings has changed, and it's really something that the city has said, hey, these are fantastic, these work. If there's an issue because the townhomes don't work or don't, how do I want to say it? Don't front the B line. I don't have any, after we got this notice 2 weeks ago, I started looking and saying, well, how can I turn take two units and turn them? So now, instead of the side of the last unit, I now have turned 2 units in each building of the townhomes that face the park, and we now have porches and doors that actually open and you look right out at the B line. So part of me says, look, we have our lists in here, we have our zoning narratives, we have our setbacks from the property line there, and we can still meet those. And if you find and say, okay, well, we can add a condition that says you must have a minimum in each townhome building of 2 facing the park, and you must have a porch and a connector to the B line, we can do that. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm kind of saying that everything that we've been told or been asked to do, we have done. And I don't think it's a big problem with these townhomes at all. And I think we have that narrative in that list. So we've been feeling like we've kind of given the narrative in the list, and then we were told architecture. So we started doing architecture, and then we went back and made the changes to the list. And I honestly think, given this PUD, we have a pretty good substantial package of items and renderings in this application. But I don't see, again, I don't know what level of conditions of approval you're allowed or not, but I know it's not going to be, if the city says we want front doors facing the park on some of these townhomes, we can do 2 per building instead of 1. I've made that work, but that happened in the last week. We're trying to get things done here also for the client who's been, on this piece of land and trying to keep it from being a warehouse again and locked up as a warehouse. We're trying to have something happen and get some approval so we can start finding a way to move forward.
So, Doug, could I just get you to clarify? Are you you're suggesting that the amendment, the Thompson Tract EPUD amendment zoning rules that are in the packet, page 17, 18, 19, and 20, is it your suggestion that those should be sufficient to stand in as the development standards?
I would say yes, that those describe what you see on the site plan, absent of architecture. Those describe what we're doing on the site plan. Now, and we have a narrative, and the narrative is a written narrative. Again, I don't have the packet in front of me, so I can't tell you what pages or what, but the narrative talks about the materials we're going to use and we're going to allow and not allow. And I think the zoning that we're adopting has those materials in it as well. So, we haven't been talking exposed concrete block and ethos. We've been talking, brick and stone and cement board panels and cement board siding, all the things that you see in at least the apartment architecture. And right now the townhomes are mostly brick, although that starts to change a little bit, but it's still mostly brick. So all of that I think is described architecturally in those pages that you mentioned.
And so maybe just to follow up then for staff, either for Jackie or for Eric, is there some, can you offer maybe some specificity as to what would be missing from that document that you would think we would need to add in order for these to be sufficient as the development standards?
Yes, Brad, I can certainly address that. So while the petitioner has outlined zoning district standards for some of the parcels here, some of our concerns have been their ability to meet that. So one of the things that they outline in their in their standards are the primary entrances, and it lists 4 zoning districts within the downtown to use for standards. Each of those zoning districts kind of have different standards in terms of how the entrance could be or would be designed, or the features that are required with each of those. So one of our concerns has been, if this building, if those entrances can't meet those standards, if they can't be recessed and it requires the building to be completely flipped around in order to accomplish that, we need to know that. That's a big issue that's relative to the primary plan. If those entrances can't be met because of the interior floor plan, if they can't recess it, the detail that has been submitted with the rendering really carries a lot of weight of, how is this building going to look? Will it be able to meet those standards? So that's one of our concerns. As I also mentioned with the southern building, the standards say that there has to be a primary entrance. It has to be recessed. That's not shown on the plan, and you're not really going to get that with the parking garage that is shown. So we need to see, how is that actually going to happen, with a building that has the entire bottom 2 floors as a parking garage. They're not showing any primary pedestrian entrance facing the trail. So that dictates how the floor plan of that building is going to be laid out. That could be a substantial change. So we want to make sure that these standards are nailed down and that it's going to translate to the site plan that can actually functionally work.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Sandberg.
Just a question procedurally, whether we decide tonight to move this forward to January for us to take a look at those tweaks, or if we make another decision, the next step of the stage goes to the City Council's Land Use Committee. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the next step would be to the City Council. It is very likely that they would forward this to the Land Use Committee.
And so is it a possibility for these additions, corrections, adherences to the proper zoning, could that be done at that level if this is a matter of moving the project forward sooner rather than later?
Yes, they can certainly make changes. However, one of the things that we've really tried to get away from are continued discussions and revisions that happen between the Plan Commission and the City Council. The Plan Commission has just as much importance in terms of reviewing elevations and site plans. And we wanted to make sure that what leaves the final Plan Commission review is the same thing that we're showing to the City Council. That the City Council doesn't see something better than the Plan Commission saw. So we want to make sure that everything is nailed down when it leaves the Plan Commission hearings.
Okay. And in your experience working with this land use committee, do they usually dispatch in one meeting or do they have two before they move it on to council?
It certainly depends on the complexity of a project. If things are very straightforward, they can do it in one hearing. More complicated petitions, like the Trinitas petition, the Motel 6 petition, those were two hearings at the Land Use Committee before going back to the full council. So it just depends on the complexity. Certainly with this particular project, the view from the Switchyard Park is a major area of concern. And we know that everybody, Plan Commission and the City Council, are going to have a very high level of expectation for that. So we wanted to make sure that this looks as great as it's going to get, because the City Council is going to have the same expectations that the Plan Commission does.
Okay.
Sorry, Susan,
oh,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, what I'm hearing Eric saying is we want to get this correct. We want to get this right before it then goes to City Council, where it may be beleaguered even longer. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Kind of. I mean, the code requires that the development standards be clear. So we're kind of saying they're not yet. We understand Doug's position, but when Eric is Mr. Bruce's position, but when Eric is reviewing and is trying to think about how this will play out in the future, just as the applicant does, he's identified some areas that he thinks might not work. And so we're hesitant to just kind of stamp it and say, okay, we'll figure it out later. We don't, we don't try to keep projects slow, belief, but we do want them to be right and have them be as complete as possible, especially in a PUD situation. As you know, they don't build this right away. They come back in 3 years, a staff person pulls out the file. They're trying to figure out what the requirements are. The petitioner has decided to make some small changes. It's just better to have a complete record at the beginning. And so we're trying to do that.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Burrell.
Can the amendment be moved forward with a written conditions instead of waiting for new drawings, not new sketches?
Yes, you could have conditions of approval that would need to outline, this standard needs to be modified or this standard needs to be increased. As we mentioned, we would like to continue it so that everything is nailed down, so that if the standard that needs to be changed, we have time to look at it and review it and make sure that it meets everything. So I'm somewhat hesitant to just say, your pedestrian entrance needs to incorporate this, that, and the other and be set back 10 feet and, things like that. So I would be hesitant about just trying to address things with a condition, but yes, you could certainly just do conditions of approval to address the areas of concern.
Can you make it very clear what the areas of concern are with the front of those townhouses?
So our concerns, you know, from a big picture, and let me just kind of go back to the sharing the screen so that I can show you rather than describe it. You know, so our concern is that, you know, these portions of the townhome that face the trail look like sides of buildings. You know, it's not looking, you know, when you look at this building here, you see a very defined entrance. You know, it's not the side of the building. You see a very clear entrance. So that is what we feel is lacking from the townhome building. So it's not necessarily something I can put in words. You know, it's more of a how does it look and feel. You know, if there was a way to say, you know, put the entrance in the center of the building that's recessed 4 feet and has an awning, that may not work for their floor plan. You know, that can have a substantial change and impact to the way that the building is laid out. So that's why it's very difficult to sit here and say, oh, you just need to change this one item, because, you know, this one item is not just a numerical thing, but it's how does it affect the entire building and the feel of it. Does that help?
I think another thing to note is, you know, we did ask for example, the reason that what they submitted has doors on that side is because we tried to say, you know, we want front doors located along the B line. So then they, you know, added doors, but that's not kind of meeting, you know, when you see this building that Eric's showing now, this is the front. You can tell it's the front. It has, you know, architectural details that a side of a building would maybe not have. You know, it has different colors, it has different materials, it has ins and outs, as we say, it has awnings, it has doors. You know, those details, that type of design is lacking on the B line, and that is a front also. It might not be a vehicular front, but it is a front. And I think just when you look down the sides of these buildings, you can tell that these are the sides of buildings, and we would prefer that they look like front of buildings. And we've been pretty open about that, but we think maybe what again might be needed is a more level of expertise, someone weighing in from Schmidt with more a better way to describe that than staff has. And that we were hoping that for this packet that we would you know, see something more articulated, like Doug mentioned, you know, stoops or something along those lines, making it obvious that these are units that front on the B line. But that didn't happen. So then we are trying to think of a better way to communicate with the applicant to make that happen. And we think that possibly engaging Schmidt could do that.
Okay, thank you. I see Commissioner St. John. Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry. I have two questions. So one is just maybe a silly question, but just so I'm clear, Eric or Jackie, are you saying that you would prefer in the packet that we have renderings when we approve this as opposed to just the narrative? I think that's what you were saying, so that it's very specific.
No, I think, oh, sorry, Eric, go ahead.
So if the district standards, you know, were crystal clear, and we could see with the renderings that they reflect 100% of what those standards required, and would meet all of the goals and expectations of the city and the comprehensive plan and the administration, then yes, we would be fine with standards that were very clear cut, that we knew would accomplish what we were trying to accomplish. But this is kind of where the disconnect is, you know, we're not sure that these standards, because the buildings that are drawn to these standards don't look like what we want to try to accomplish.
Right, I get that. So thank you. So what you're saying is you prefer to have a rendering that really shows you exactly what will be built there.
We have found 9 times out of 10 that is more helpful and just as helpful to supplement the standards that show here is a building that will be built to these standards, and we can see visually, yes, that's what we want.
Okay, thank you. And so given that that's what staff prefers, and that Mr. Bruce has articulated that they can change those townhomes. It would require then, if they're willing to do that, to submit new renderings. Because if staff wants renderings to ensure the standards that are being sought, then they by definition need to go back and submit new renderings. Is that's true?
New renderings and standards, you know, for
Right.
instance, you
Okay.
know, for the townhome buildings, you know, they propose just using the residential multifamily district, which doesn't really deal with pedestrian entrances, you know,
Right.
they're not designed for this type of project and this type of situation. So
Right.
that's where additional level of detail has to be put into the district standards to make sure that we accomplish the buildings that we want to see here.
Okay, so the renderings are changed to reflect the new standards, and this narrative itself is also enhanced to reflect the kind of standards you're looking for, and that is what staff is hoping to get.
Yes.
Okay, and so it sounds like Mr. Bruce is willing to make changes to those townhomes. Of course, it's going to add more time for the petitioner, which isn't ideal, but it's a very important piece of property, as you all have articulated from staff and a few other commissioners. So it's taking longer, but it's so important to get that right. I wonder, Mr. Bruce, if you're also willing to make changes. I think, Eric, you mentioned with the garage, the first 2 floors there, that really wasn't quite to the point that you would want. Is that right?
Yeah, so we would be looking for changes to the garage as well. And so, you know, I just wanted to point out that, you know, kind of doing the legwork now can also potentially reduce the time at the city council as well. So rather than us taking 3 hearings at the city council, this could potentially be done in 2. So, you know, putting that time into the project now helps save them time in the future. But
okay.
yes.
Okay, so if I can just ask the petitioner, if you're willing to also go back and look at the garage again, since you're willing to look at the townhomes.
Yeah, well, so what I'll say about that building, there's some problematic issues with that building. I certainly see what Eric is saying. And for me, I think what would probably have to happen is a better defined entry from Hillside, because you're really not going to get an entry on the side facing the beeline. And here's why. If you look at that rendering, directly in front of us is a 30-foot easement that is an easement from Hillside to the warehouse building to the south. So we really can't do much there. And then between that 30-foot easement and the beeline is a parcel of wooded property that is owned by the city. So we're really not directly on the beeline. In one instance, we're a parcel off the beeline. But I certainly see where we could probably do something more defined for the entry that we have in the elevator lobby entry area facing Hillside. The reason that we have 2 levels of parking is if you walk that site, that parking lot slopes from a high point in the southwest corner to kind of a low point in the northeast corner. So it really almost slopes from west to drops towards east, towards the beeline. And so it made sense to build 2 different levels of accessible parking. At one end, along the west side, you enter in and you can park on a level, and one end, if you enter in on the east side of this lot, you can enter in and park, and you'll have minimal excavation, but you'll be able to get 2 levels of parking that are really accessible at grade in 2 different locations. So it's not necessarily 2 complete stories out of the ground, but it allowed us to add some parking because that is, that area is where we're going to have some commercial, and we don't really have that much parking in the 2 commercial buildings on our site the way it is because we're trying to put commercial space in them as well. So we might get 14 spaces here or 12 spaces there and commercial space. We also tried to minimize the amount of parking lot we had. You know, we met with the neighborhood and they were very concerned about the number of cars. So we tried to reduce the parking requirements down so that hopefully this will be more people that'll live here that'll have a bicycle and use the beeline to get up and down and around and want to live next to a park and not necessarily have a car they're dragging along. But the other issue that we have with the South building is that parking lot, there are, I think, 20, is it 20 at a minimum, or maybe 30?
There's 30.
There's 30 spaces on that parking lot as it sits right now that are, is it leased or owned? Leased or owned by other parties. So I think 10 of the spaces are leased and 20 are owned by somebody else. So if we're only doing 34 or 35 parking spaces on one level and the other level has 43, 30 of all of those spaces are spaces we don't get to use and that are either leased or owned by somebody else. So it makes it difficult to just do one level of parking with 40 spaces, and now we lose 30 of them. So to do a building there with the easement that we have in the front that sets us 30 feet further back from the beeline, the only real entrance is going to be off the hillside. But again, to answer your question, I think that's where the pedestrian entrance would happen, and I think there could be some more detailing to it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, any additional questions from commissioners? Let's go to Commissioner Sandberg.
Some of these standards that we are suggesting that the petitioners develop further, do they need to be balconies or doorways, or could they be something more in terms of a landscape feature, like maybe a patio with seating area or some more attractive landscaping? Is that what we mean by detail, or is it strictly within the building itself?
So, what we're looking for are opportunities and features that provide areas for residences to be facing the trail. So whether that balconies are kind of the easiest way to do that because you can add those features to each of the living spaces. And Mr. Bruce showed that on one of the elevations that we got. Ground floor patio, if it accessed the units, could be fine. Like I said, we're really trying to accomplish a design that places more eyes on the trail for security purposes as much as aesthetics for the building.
Okay, and I'm just thinking out loud to give the petitioner a few more options to incorporate if we're expecting a little more detail and a little more of that interaction with the trail. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Commissioner Kate.
So I just want to make sure I'm tracking the next steps because if petitioner is going to sit down and make some further changes, it sounded to me like, Jackie, you were talking about getting further guidance for what the office is looking for rather than kick it back to the petitioner and say, kind of rethink it from what we're talking about here, but trying to provide some more specific guidance about exactly what the office is looking for and the city's looking for. Is that right?
Yes, so you'll recall that the Schmidt Associates we've used in the past for architectural comments on petitions. And so, yes, we would just send them our standard request, and then we have basically they send us a form with comments. And so we would just ask, particularly for the issues that Eric has identified.
Okay.
And we could do that, I think, fairly quickly. I mean, obviously it's about to be the holidays, but we, because it's not a full review and they have seen some of it already, I think that's what we would prefer to try.
Okay,
and
Bill, that was going to be
also-
my next question, is how long would that take?
Yeah, so I mean, also, as Mr. Bruce has pointed out, they are willing to make changes. They maybe made some last week after final revisions, and if they can continue to work with Eric and satisfy his concerns, then we don't necessarily have to wait for outside input. We are just trying to think of a way to maybe bring in another party because we feel like we've been pretty clear about what we're asking for, and that for some reason it's not translating. But what he's saying here at the meeting does sound like he has a better idea of what we were looking for, and so it's possible that could be done without Schmidt, but we would definitely reach out to them immediately and see if they could offer some suggestions.
Okay, and then my only other question is, I understand the idea about putting lots of eyes on the trail for security purposes, but I am curious whether there is any security or safety issue about having entrances and front level patios and things like that right on the trail. Is that a problem, an issue?
Well, I mean, yes,
sorry,
that would probably be something the petitioner would want to address from their building. I'm sure that they, have a coded key entry for that, for all the doors. Certainly patios along the ground floor with doors, might be a security concern for them for the ground floor units. But the petitioner could probably address that.
Would petitioner like to address that?
Well, yeah, I mean, Eric's right. I mean, certainly the larger apartment buildings would have keyed access. So, you're not going to just walk in. The townhomes, I mean, there was, if you look at the one rendering, I mean, that's why we kind of faced initially. I mean, if you go and look at that area of the park right now, where this site falls along the park, that's about where the bocce ball and some of the basketball courts are down by where the townhomes are and maybe our first apartment building there. But keep going. There's another rendering. There you go. Okay. So if you look at that rendering, what we did there was the initial idea was that we would provide a place for people, these are narrow townhomes. So, they're 21, 22 feet wide. And so you're trying to get 5 of them in a building, again, to fit. So what we did was we turned and made the entrances of the townhomes facing each other. So while we're connected to the park with kind of the green fingers, you say, or you see between the beeline, between these buildings, you would have a walkway there, and then you would have entrances. So while you can see from that view, you'll be able to see the frontage of these townhomes, but they have a little more security in numbers because they're kind of facing each other. So they're 20 to 24 feet apart. They're literally like a walk-up, like a brownstone or something. But we because they're narrow, you're going to have a staircase in there going up, and you're going to have a kitchen. And so this wall facing the park, the renderings, what we did on those buildings was we made it so that the door is actually visible from the park. And we have a patio there where someone could set, and this whole thing could be raised up a bit. That's probably our concern about security. I mean, my office is 3 blocks away from the park right now, and I come here on a Saturday and find people sitting on my front porch. I've replaced the chairs on the front porch a few times already. So, that area right now at the park with the bocce ball stuff is not it's got a lot of other people's belongings. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. So I don't know about, I mean, we've been able to face these doors on another rendering or another view this past week. But right now, this is as safe as it gets with these units facing each other. You still have windows and those gray areas are kind of a bay that face out into the park. But I don't know if I want a bunch of people from the park standing at my window facing into my unit too. So there is a balance that you have to have here right now. But I'm hoping that all of this also improves over time too, as more people discover the park. I mean, it hasn't been open long enough yet, and then we've had COVID to kind of shut the numbers of people that use it and activities that take place down. So we understand that too.
Okay. Yeah, that's I guess one question I had as I look at this. On the one hand, I completely see the issue of what the facade looks like facing the trail. And the possibility of exploring other ways to make that aesthetically more integrated, if you will, with the trail. But from a safety standpoint, if it were me, I might have some concerns about that entrance being right onto the trail, even though the idea behind all this is, again, eyes on it, collective security. So anyway.
You bring up, so one thing that we didn't want to do that I've seen in other areas of the park, or not of the park, of the trail, just north of here, we didn't want to put a bunch of fences. We did not want to gate this site off. So that's a difference. If you go further north of the park, there's houses on the park and they have doors facing the park, but they've got gates and fences along.
True.
Yeah, and that's not what we wanted to do here. So, you know,
And
certainly.
I'm not suggesting that, I just want to be clear, yeah.
What's that?
I'm not suggesting that either.
But I guess I'm saying that this way that you see in front of you right now is a way for us to keep it open so people can come through here. I mean, it would be great if there was a connector from the B-line through here, through the neighborhood to the west of us. But right now that, you know, again, there's all houses back there. There's not a parcel of property that's open. There was an alley that had been abandoned or given up years ago. Vacated years ago, that's right. So we don't have any real way to connect there, but we were trying to turn these buildings this way so that they faced each other with common entrances and you could walk through them to get to any, that this wasn't a singular gated community, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from commissioners?
Yeah,
All right. Oh, one more.
yeah, sorry, Brett. I think I have one more. I'm gonna try and bring this point home, at least in my own mind here. What we want to try and do here is either establish clear development standards I'm going to just refer to the pages that begin on 17, where there's less conflict, or where there's no conflict, how about that, between, or ambiguity in some areas, or we want to see renderings that better illustrate what the design expectations are for this space. Is it an either or is it both for the petitioner?
I think starting on day one, it's an either or, but since they've already given us these detailed renderings, I mean, I think what Eric has said, and so Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, is that, for example, he sells this, someone else comes in, they say, we want to build these drawings. We are going to have to say, those don't meet your development standards that you've included. Not by a wild amount, but they should match. And I think that's what we're trying to get at. So at this point, and we always do think when something goes to council, even if it's a rezone for something that's this visual, that's this visible, having a drawing is helpful. They are going to ask questions. Plan Commission does too. That's just the nature of the beast here. But yes, we want the written description to, if you're going to give us an example of what the written description will show, we want it to be right. We want it to be able to be built under those rules.
All right, thank you. Any further questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Herrera.
So Jackie, just to clarify as well. So before this reaches the council, the expectation is to have by that time the new renderings, the new requirements that you have been requesting. Is that
yes. We would like to bring this back to you at the January meeting with new standards and new drawings that address the issues Eric's identified.
So
then it would go to council.
Okay, so this will come back to us in January, and based on the changes, then we will proceed with the decision from the Plan Commission to go to the council.
That is our recommendation, yes.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will go now to public comment. So if you are here from the public and you'd like to make comment on PUD 17-20, the way to do that would be to click on the participants button in the bottom of your screen. And once you do that, you should see a button in the bottom of the participants tab that says raise hand. And if you raise your hand, Jackie will recognize you when it's your turn to speak. You'll have up to 5 minutes to make your comments. Just as a reminder, this is not really a time for back and forth discussion, but if you do pose questions during your comment, we'll do our best to get those answered once we get back to our agenda. So with that, if there are any raised hands, Jackie, go ahead and let's begin public comment.
Okay, I don't see any, and I haven't gotten any chats either. So don't think anyone's asking, and there's nothing on Facebook either. Oh, Brad, you're muted.
Aha, thank you. If you're having any trouble raising your virtual hand, feel free to just turn on your camera and wave your actual hands, and we'll try to recognize you that way as well. But I'll give it just a few more seconds here to make sure we don't miss anybody who wants to comment. Okay, I don't see any. So we will go back to the commission. So at this time, I think it would be appropriate for us to get a motion on the floor, and then we can have some final discussion about that motion. Is anyone prepared to make motion?
I'll motion to forward this petition to the January 11th, 2021 Plan Commission meeting for hearing.
I'll second that. But I think we need perhaps to add a little bit about what we would like to have happen between now and then.
Right.
Okay.
That's what I want to say. The changes that we might want to have for the January 11th meeting. Yeah, I agree with Beth.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. The motion is to continue this to an additional hearing in our January meeting. So let's have some final discussion here before we vote on that motion. And I think, yeah, if we can just make it as crystal clear as we possibly can, what the expectation should be for this next meeting, so that we can keep this moving as best we can. Anyone want to begin final comments? Commissioner St. John, go ahead.
Maybe to reiterate that we would like a rendering, and we would like clarified what the petitioner calls Thompson Tract EPUD amendment zoning rules, that those are clarified based on the comments from Eric and Jackie. So it would be both that we would get back as opposed to one or the other.
Okay.
I'd like to, may I say something?
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Burrell.
Well, I want to make sure that we understand as a group that this is, when they come back, it's not a final planning decision. What we're deciding here is just a land use. And the reason we are in this predicament is because they went far away beyond of what they were expected. So they're almost being penalized for doing a good job. All they need to set is we need to know is the standards of what each building is going to provide. So because the final approval for the preliminary plans will be done at a different meeting. This is not about the design work. It's about what the standards, what those buildings are going to do, and what they are going to be. So I understand when Eric talks about a feel, which is hard to describe a feel of what this is, because this is an important location, which is in front of the beat line, and it's our pride and joy, and the Switchyard Park as well. So, but for the commissioners, I guess what I just want to remind you is that we are doing an amendment to a PUD. So it's just a land use we're going to amend here. And as long as it is clear what the intent of those buildings are, and Eric and the petitioner can work that out, that's all we need, correct?
Right.
Yes and no. I don't know if that's if you want me to answer the question. Yes, it is. It's a rezone 100%. But the development standards that we do have aren't, because this is a plan unit development, and we can work with them on goals for the plan unit development. This one being a positive interface with the B line. The development standards that they have submitted don't do that. So we see that in the rendering they've given, and they say, "Oh yes, we'll fix it." And we work with Doug all the time. I know that he will work his hardest to help us and his client, reach the best solution. But we need to have those written as well, because if what's written can also get us what they're showing now, we don't want that. We want an improved interface. So we do need to see it changed. Yeah, that's all. But yes, point well taken.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from commissioners?
I mean, I just want to say I really appreciate the work that Doug Bruce and colleagues have done on, the petitioner has done on this property to improve it. And I realize it's complicated, but I think we are particularly sensitive to what this space will allow. And as Commissioner Burrell just indicated, I mean, it's a prized location. So I think we do want to be specific. And I regret the extra time involved and the fact that extra work has been done on this, but I see the conflicts in the development standards. So I think we have to be clear about what this allows. And it's unfortunate if it's gone back and forth several times here, but I understand we all have, there are lots of visions for what this property should be, could be, we want it to be. And it's both exciting, but also maddening, I'm sure, in terms of how many different visions we can have for it. So I think we want to be as clear as possible. And it sounds like we're terribly close. So I'd really like it to move forward so we can get it right and be right about it so that it's patently clear.
Commissioner Sandberg.
I agree with that. I think it's unfortunate. It seems that there have been several miscommunications from the very, very beginning of this design, being told we want this, we want that. You've met with McDowell, and now I would imagine McDowell is maybe not quite as happy with this as they would have been with the single family configuration. That said, this is going to provide some good housing options, some good density here along this very prized location. And so I guess I'm feeling like if we can get this right at the Plan Commission level, I am hoping that this will save you some time at the City Council level. And so that's why I will be in support of bringing it back in January and making sure that things are as tight as we can make them. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kate.
So just to be clear on the motion we're going to make then to get us back in January in a place where hopefully this could be approved and it can go forward. The two things that we want to give further guidance on right now are to come back with an answer to the issue of whether and how primary entrances for the townhomes would be placed facing the trail, or if not, what alternative aesthetics would satisfy the city's desire to have integration and petitioners' concerns about safety. And I raised the safety issue too, so I'll own it. I mean, I have a question in my own mind about that. So that's one. And then the other is the parking and whether there is any further ability to integrate some active use space instead of some of that parking dedicated in the south building. Is there anything else that, or is that, when I look at pages 17 through 20 and the list of things, Eric and Jackie, are there any other things in there that are standing out as ones that need further attention in this next round?
Well, those are the big things. As you mentioned, there are just a few holes that are in these standards that need to be addressed, either to satisfy the concern regarding the pedestrian entrance, or just general things that aren't addressed that conflict with what's shown that we need to get addressed. So the pedestrian entrances, specific standards for those. There are anti-monotony standards that conflict with what's proposed in their multifamily district that they didn't address. So they need to address that. They need to address materials. So there are just some various holes that we would like to get fixed so that it, as Jackie's mentioned, so that the district standards are nailed down and we know what we're getting and we have renderings that match that.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments? I'll offer my own. I suppose this is, this is disappointing, and I certainly feel for the petitioner here. I think it sounds like we're not far off, and it sounds like we certainly could have had language crafted before this meeting that would have addressed the issues. I certainly understand why it's easier to just look at a picture and understand if that works, but the reality is that we have to be able to describe what is permitted in words. We can't have a system that just requires petitioners to say, well, what about this? What about this? Do you like this? And and have that's not a system that works. We run the risk, and I think we're already getting dangerously close to design by committee here. And the primary reason that I'm not pushing hard to move this along to the council now is if we did forward this to council without those things being specified, you would end up with a design by committee situation, which I think none of us want. But we've got to make this clearer. There really just isn't any reason why we couldn't have had these standards spelled out prior to this meeting, other than there seems to have been some miscommunication. So I would just encourage staff in the future to just start there and try to get a list of standards. And for those who don't maybe follow what's going on here in the public, if we were requesting a rezone to an existing standard, to an existing zone, if we were rezoning this to multifamily, this wouldn't be an issue because those existing zones already have the development standards spelled out in our zoning code. But because this is a PUD, the PUD gets its own special development standards that have to be done along with this. But it really, we're not going to have a system that works if we have to have final renderings before every rezone that we consider. That just isn't going to work. And I get that this is a special property, but it's also, I think, a bit of a slippery slope if we make this our practice every time. So I'm going to do my best to make this in and out at our next hearing in January. I know that staff and petitioners are going to work hard to make sure that this is an easy decision for us next time, and I'm looking forward to that. So with that, Jackie, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, thank you. St. John?
Yes.
Copper?
Yes.
Kinsey?
Yes.
Sorry,
Kate?
I'm having some.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Burrell?
Yes.
Herrera?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
Whistler? Oh, Brad, can you hear us? Whistler? Oh, we can hear you, I think. Maybe not.
Sorry, y'all, I've lost sound.
Yes, we
Give me
can
a
hear
moment.
you.
There we go.
Okay, it's to you for your vote, Whistler.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so that's 8-0. Okay, so that petition is continued to the January hearing, and we will work with the petitioner on clarifying the rules and drawings for that hearing.
All right. Thank you. We are now on to the next petition, which is VO-23-20. Bill C. Brown Revocable Trust is the petitioner. Property is located at 3100 West Fullerton Pike. This is a request for rezone of 87 acres from planned unit development to mixed-use corridor. There's also a requested waiver from the required second hearing. And Eric Rulick, once again, is the case manager. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Brad. Sorry about that. Fortunately, I didn't get very far there. So yes, as you mentioned, this is a request from the Bill C. Brown Revocable Trust for the property at 3100 West Fullerton Pike. So the petitioner is requesting to rezone this 87-acre property from a planned unit development to mixed-use corridor zoning district. So this was last heard at the November 9th Plan Commission meeting just last month. At that time, the Plan Commission discussed the proposal, expressed some concern regarding preserving land within the community for employment uses. We talked about the uniqueness of this particular site at the location within the community, adjacent to I-69 and Fullerton Pike. The petitioner discussed the possibility of voluntarily restricting some of the land uses within the petition site. However, there have not been any changes to the petition request from what was last heard at the November hearing. So the petitioner is coming forward here tonight for the second hearing for the site. So real quickly, I'll just kind of go over the site as a whole. It's 87 acres, was zoned as a planned unit development in the mid-1980s. Not much has happened on the site other than a site plan approval in 2015 in order to allow for some of the topsoil on the site to be sold for the development and construction of I-69. So the aerial photograph that you see kind of reflects the grading and disturbance that was allowed on the site and that was accomplished. So the areas of the site that are covered by trees and riparian buffer were set aside in easements. You can kind of see the center of the path that was kind of graded out for the future road that would extend through the site. So the comprehensive plan designates this site as employment. The PUD was improved with a mix of uses, mostly centered around the manufacturing park zoning district. The use list was carefully discussed at that time of the rezoning. Restricted hotels, restricted retail uses, was predominantly manufacturing, and uses that were employment generating. So as I mentioned, this site, as well as all the properties to the north of this within the Southern Indiana Medical Park, and then further to the north along Tap Road and along I-69, are all designated as employment. So the employment uses within the comprehensive plan certainly are designated to promote uses that are high employment generated, not vehicle oriented, not car oriented. As we discussed at the last hearing, this property is unique in several regards. One, it's a large property, 87 acres, which makes it very well suited for large office parks. The location immediately adjacent to I-69 with its own exit ramp and on-ramp provides easy access, not just for people within the community, but for regional employment as well. So as we discussed with the last hearing, the comprehensive plan designation of this as employment dictates or governs that this should be used for employment generating uses. Within our draft zoning map, we have proposed that this site be zoned as mixed use employment to help further those goals of the comprehensive plan. We certainly believe that the rezoning of this to mixed use corridor, while there are some uses within there that could be employment generators, the mixed use corridor is not designated or envisioned as an employment district. It has certainly a lot of retail uses, a lot of vehicle oriented uses that we would not want to see on this property. So we are recommending that the Plan Commission forward this to the Common Council with a denial recommendation based on the findings that are in staff's report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. Is there a representative of the petitioner who would like to make a presentation?
Mr. Carmen, I assume it's you. I'm trying to unmute you. Let's see. There you go.
All right, thank you. Sorry for the delay. Okay. I am Mike Carmen, representing the petitioner. When we talked last meeting, one of the questions asked when it was finally voted to move this on to this meeting, what's going to be different if we come back? I think it's Ms. Kinsey. I think she's nodding her head now. It was her question or her challenge, I would say. And while the petition itself has not changed, since we looked at several things and took hard looks at things to make this a different petition, and got frustrated at each level. 87 acres is a large tract. You don't have any single user in this county that would do that, or this community is going to develop 87 acres. It's going to be multiple users. We had raised the question before and much staff opposition to a split zoning lot. Looked at, even after the last meeting, still looked at the issue of there's going to be at some point a road that connects Fullerton Pike north to the medical park, as was just mentioned, and that it would be almost a natural split of zoning of ME on the east side of that road, MC on the west side, and certainly would recognize that as a bit of a compromise to preserving ME only uses. I'm going to talk more about why I emphasize only on the east side. And in all honesty, we got no support for that, got open opposition to it. I think it's unfounded. I think that's a very reasonable approach to this, but we got no take on that. We looked at because staff doesn't like split zoning lots. They're not illegal. There's nothing wrong with them. They just don't like them. And so, I mean, it's a tough argument to make and face staff opposition. So we looked at a 2-lot subdivision. Go ahead and formally divide it. So we'd have 2 lots. One could be designated, one for MC zoning, one for ME zoning. And there are significant obstacles to doing that. First of all, it makes it a new petition. It puts us back at square one. We make that change the petition and come forward, and you still don't like that, then where are we? We have nothing that we want to move forward on, and if you don't like it, there are significant construction problems with a 2-lot subdivision. That road that will need to go in here at some point is going to end up being a dedicated right-of-way. It's going to be constructed from Fullerton Pike north to the north property line of this property, bisecting it north and south, a little bit further to the west than being in the middle of the property, but so maybe it's closer to 1/3, 2/3 split north to south. That road is $2.6 million to build. $2.6 million to build. Now, there is no user come along and buy a piece of this property and build it for employment-based uses that's going to pay enough to warrant putting $2.6 million into a road. It is just not going to happen. That's why we have TIF districts. I'd like to go back and talk about why the TIF district doesn't exist out there, and why, if this is such an employment-based zone and so unique, this is exactly why we have TIF districts, to put in roads and infrastructure to spur that development that you say you want, or the staff says that they want here, but that's not going to happen here because this is no longer a TIF district. That road's going to get built by anybody but out of private money. And it takes development to generate that kind of money. You do not get that development. You do not get that price out of the ME uses. There is no ME use big enough that's going to come to this community that does not want incentives. You've heard it before. You've heard it from BDC and from others before. Bigger users coming to develop those kind of employment-based uses here, what do they want? They want tax abatements. Council has confronted tax abatement issues repeatedly. Monroe County Council as well, commissioners. They want their infrastructure in place. They're not going to come here with the idea they have to be able to build what they want to build and set up that employment-based use, that they're going to spend the money to put a road in. It needs to be in place. They come looking for shovel-ready property, which is one reason why we're looking to do this rezoning now, to have a position for some potential users. So there are significant problems with trying to change the petition. If we would do the 2-lot subdivision, even if we were allowed to bond to delay the construction of the road to a later date, but even the bond cost becomes significant. And for how long? How many years does that have to be renewed? This property sat out there for 35 years. And if you, in your packet, staff included a lot of the history of the PUD, the permitted uses, some changes on this list of permitted uses at a couple different times of the year, but you look at those uses. They are, in fact, what staff is still saying, this is what we want here. And for 35 years, that's been true. And for 35 years, it hasn't happened. So how much longer? This is not a monopoly board where we get to say Park Place goes here, Boardwalk goes there, and you can put a hotel on it. We're dealing with St. James, Vermont, and Indiana properties, not Park Place and Boardwalk. And that's a significant issue. So we have Bill Brown, is his trust, and Bill's the property owner of this. Bill is not a novice at this. Bill developed Park 37, Park 48. He knows what it takes to get done. For 35 years, he's attempted to shoehorn light industrial uses onto this property, and it's not happened. And it's not going to happen in the near future. There is no large employer investing, I don't think, any place who's going to come in and take 30 or 40 or 45 acres and put a use on it. It's not going to happen. And people who want 3 or 4 or 5 acres are not going to pay enough to put in a $2.6 million road. So why do we want the MC? Well, if you look at the allowed uses, Eric says they're not the same. It is almost all the ME uses are allowed in the MC zone. You do not lose those with one exception, the line item, light industrial, or light manufacturing, I believe it is in the table of allowed uses. It's light manufacturing. That is a P in the ME zone. It is not a permitted use in the MC zone. But those are, again, I would submit that if you go back and look at the PUD uses, those have been on this property for 35 years and have not generated any interest at that location. The MC uses do a couple things. They add some flexibility. They add some possibility of uses that would develop. I'm going to tell you, generally, an MC use is going to command a higher lot price than an ME use, a higher purchase price for the land, which is important, not because it's profit for Mr. Brown, it's because that's how you generate the money to build the road, is you got to get it out of what you can sell free land to justify putting that kind of money into the road. And so it has that advantage. Getting some MC use is important there because we have some potential users, or at least one, fairly significant. If it works out, we won't know. We're not going to know within a year. It's not going to happen tomorrow. Don't mean to mislead that. But we potential use, as mentioned before, that is looking for mixed use surrounding them. They want the hotel there. They want the restaurant there, because if they develop their training center, they've got people that need access to those things. Now, some of those uses are allowed in the ME. Hotels are allowed, but it's with an asterisk. The restaurant is allowed, but it's with an asterisk, meaning there are restrictions and conditions that are tied to those things if it's in the ME zone that are not present in the MC zone. So we do attach a lot of importance to this site. We agree with that. It is an important site, but it's been an important site for 35 years, long before I-69 was a twinkle in anybody's eye, or less than a twinkle, depending on how you came down on that issue. This was, in fact, immediately next to State Road 37, direct access to what was the principal corridor highway in central Indiana. It was there and available, and that didn't induce anybody. I-69 is not going to change that. It's just a bigger road, but it has the same attraction that's been there for 35 years, and it's not been enough. So the urge to rezone this MC, nobody's arguing that against rezoning the PUD to something different. That seems to be a given. I assume for you, certainly it is for the staff. Mr. Brown's accepting of that the PUD can go away. So which does it become? MC, ME? We tried to offer some other things. Even last time we talked, there's some retail uses you may not want there. Okay, we can do deed restrictions or zoning commitments to limit those. What was the reaction we got from staff? No, we don't like those. They're hard to administer. Right? I would tell you, just 35 years, Mr. Brown deserves something. So some help, some assistance on getting something done with this land. And your only ability to help or assist in that is to get it rezoned, to give him some more flexibility to let that happen. And that's why I'm keep coming back urging the MC zoning on this. And I do so with some fervor. I understand that. A lot of these meetings are very calm, very, very mild. I understand that, and I rarely am. And I know I'm speaking with a little bit of force now, and I hope you understand that, because that's not histrionics. That's not playing games with you. That's urging you to take a hard look at this from Mr. Brown's perspective, from the property owner's perspective. The MC is a reasonable zoning use of this property. The MC uses allow for employment type uses for the most part that are the same as the ME, except for the light manufacturing. It allows some additional uses that are important for that flexibility, not only for those developers who will come along and take a piece of this and develop it for their need, desires, but also allows that flexibility that's going to help get that road built. That is a major obstacle to any serious development of this site. It'd be great if Ms. Sandberg could commit the city to funding that road, and we'll put the TIF back out there, and we'll take the money away from Switchyard Park, or the hospital side, or the Trades District, and put it out there where it needs to be. At least in my opinion, at the moment, it needs to be there, but that's not going to happen in the foreseeable future. And so we would encourage you to support the rezoning to MC. It takes very little, almost nothing away that the MC would provide, and adds a lot more that is that needed flexibility for development of this site to spur the development and get the road built. So, and I know there are, at least by looking at the names I can see on the screen, there's at least a couple people are going to speak to some of these issues tonight also. I guess that's all I'll say for now. It's up to your questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Carmen. Are there questions from commissioners, either for staff or for the petitioner at this point? Let's go to Commissioner Katie.
I have a question for Eric, I guess, because I'd like to understand the response to what Mr. Carmen just said about the distinction between ME and MC in terms of what things specifically. I know in reading the materials, there were things listed like a gas station and some other things like that that were problematic. But is there the ability to identify a list of things that that both sides could agree, yeah, we're not going to look to use MC zoned property for these purposes, and move forward? And I'd appreciate your response to Eric on the issue of the ability to fund the road. In other words, the likelihood that this would attract the necessary ME.
Are that are not allowed and that's what you get is the ME district. So that's kind of accomplishing the same thing. The hotel isn't allowed use. That's something that he has said. It's a conditional use, but those standards are usually pretty easy to meet. In terms of funding a road through here and TIF district funds, that's something that is a discussion that the administration is better suited to answering. Certainly, a lot of those TIF funds were used for Switchyard Park and other projects, but that is something that the Mayor's Office in Economic Sustainable Development manages. That I don't really think I would be best suited to answer on the availability or the likelihood that the city would use those to help fund a private road through here.
Thanks, Eric. Can I just follow up really fast and just ask, because I'd like to better understand the daylight between ME and ME asterisk and MC for things like the hotel and the restaurant, which is what I thought I was hearing emphasized by the petitioner, by Mr. Carmen, when he was talking about what they're looking to do to build to attract at least one major investor into the spot. So what is that daylight between ME asterisk and MC?
Yep. Well, so as I mentioned, so in the ME district, a hotel is listed as a conditional use. So there's not, a specific limitation on it, like a size limitation or a number of the rooms or anything like that. It's just listed as a conditional use. So it goes through the conditional use approval process. There are certain set criteria that are outlined for the conditional use approval. So it could be approved as part of that. So it is a possibility. The restaurant is listed as a permitted use within the ME district. It does have a limitation that goes along with that. And that limitation in the ME district just says that it can't be more than 2,500 square feet. So the intent of that is, you can have a restaurant type of use, but it's not the main use that happens on the property. It's there to help supplement the office park as a whole. It's to, give you a place to go eat, for all the people that work in that employment. The intention is not for a large major franchise like Outback or somebody to come in and develop the site. It's there to serve the other uses on the site.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sorry, Beth, if I can weigh in as well. When Eric says, or also when Mr. Carmen says that we don't like these extra uses there, he's talking about the comprehensive plan, and the comprehensive plan says that this area should be employment. So we can get into the weeds about the uses and the differences, but the reason we're recommending mixed use employment is because the comprehensive plan is very clear that that's what this area is for. And so while some of the concerns he's raising, saying, there's too much land here, it can't be employment, no one will build a road, those are issues that need to be raised when that future land use is determined, which was done more than 2 years ago. To do that now at a rezone and ask this body and then council to rezone to something that doesn't match the land use long-term land use plan we just adopted a couple years ago, we feel is misplaced. We think that we have to, and in turn are recommending to you and will to council, follow the comprehensive plan, and that it's very clear. And again, not to say that the concerns he's raised aren't maybe valid, but this isn't quite the venue for those. That happened. And obviously the council decided to go ahead and recommend employment for this location.
Well,
yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, okay, no, I was gonna say, well, actually my next question then is for Mr. Carmen, which is, when I hear what you've just described as at least the anticipated partial use of this property by Mr. Brown, it is, you mentioned a training center, and then with the hotel and restaurant facility to accommodate the people who'd be coming in for that. What about that is inconsistent with an ME designation?
It could be nothing. It could very well be, but it also, every time you have a condition, every time you have a limitation, you now limit your options, you now limit opportunities. So uncomfortable trying to give the assurance to a prospective large developer of the training center that the restaurant's going to be built there within that limitation. 2,500 square feet is not that big. And as restaurants go. So now we're already limiting the opportunity, and so it becomes a preference issue of not having those limitations to give a better comfort level, better assurance to the prospective developer that the mixed use that they want to be surrounding that it will likely happen, as opposed to, well, it could, but gee, they're going to have to within these limitations. So it's just that comfort level.
Thank you both, all three.
Additional questions? Let's go to Commissioner St. John.
Thanks. Eric, I wanted to have you weigh in. The petitioner, Mr. Carmen, suggested that it could be split zone and that's not illegal, but it's not something staff would support. Could you just talk about that potential position for this 87-acre parcel?
Yep. So, I'll touch on just the big problem with that is the comprehensive plan designates this as employment. So the entire property should be zoned with uses that fall in line with the comprehensive plan. So, our basic premise here is the mixed use corridor does not fall into line with the comprehensive plan recommendation for this property. Second to that, split zoning, especially split zoning where you don't have a property line, which is, pretty much the definition of split zoning. You don't have a definitive line on the ground that you're measuring from. That's the problem with split zoning. And we've dealt with this in a handful of situations within Bloomington where we had split zoning, and we made every effort to fix that when we updated the zoning map. And we've identified that again for the few instances that are remaining to fix that issue, because it's very impossible to measure a setback from a line that doesn't exist. But just going back to what I said initially, the comprehensive plan designates this as employment. So, we can't justify any zoning district that doesn't go along with that. Mr. Carmen's argument here is that the comprehensive plan doesn't follow what should happen here. So, he should, that's the premise here, is that the comprehensive plan is flawed for this site.
Or the desires for what they want to go here don't match the comprehensive plan. So a request to amend the comprehensive plan probably should have been filed.
May I ask a question about, so there are 87 acres. Can it be subdivided in different parcels, be different zones?
So it can be subdivided, but the entire property would still have one zoning district, regardless of how many ways you split it up. So if he came forward with a subdivision proposal and a rezoning, that had, one side of the road zoned one thing and one side of the road zoned something else, then that's something different. However, it still goes back to our initial problem that the comprehensive plan designates this entire area as employment. So any zoning should fall in line with that comprehensive plan recommendation. So he can still subdivide and everything within here would have one zoning district, but rezoning a portion of it to something that doesn't match the comprehensive plan is the basic problem.
Okay, let's go to Commissioner Kate.
Yeah, thanks. Eric, what about the restaurant limitation issue? Is there any flexibility on that, or is that a hard and fast 2,500 square feet in one restaurant only? Or is there a possibility for more than one? If this is sort of something that might come in that actually would serve the needs of the ME designation by providing jobs and employment, but is there any flexibility in terms of the services surrounding that and some of the conditions on them, like what you mentioned before, the restaurant limitation?
So that's a good question. The 2,500 square foot limitation is something that was new to the zoning code. We haven't had to apply it. It's possible that we can make some interpretation on each parcel, there's a restaurant use, or, you could have several restaurants where each one is not more than 2,500 square feet. You know, I will also point out that we are initiating amendments to the UDO. If the Planning Commission feels like this 2,500 square feet is too limiting, certainly that's something that could be amended and changed and revised. So we haven't really had to put this into application yet, but you know, I think it's possible that there are a couple different ways.
It doesn't limit number of restaurants, right? It's just that every restaurant has a maximum of 25 each.
Thank you. Yeah. And that
Okay,
would be without subdividing, Jackie, right? In other words.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thanks.
Commissioner Cochran.
Great. I've got a couple of questions, but Mr. Carmen talked about this at one time being a TIF district. Can we get a little bit of history on that? Because obviously roads do cost money and the development has to support that in some way. So as this is encouraged to be an employment district, you would think that it would have some TIF dollars. So is there some history I can get on that process or what happened to this not becoming a TIF district?
There's probably a lot of history. I'm not sure if we're the group to have the details. Eric, feel free to weigh in, but my understanding is, right, don't we have a consolidated TIF district? And as Eric mentioned, a lot of that money was used on the park and used obviously for other projects as well. Whether or not there was a TIF located out here, I'm not sure. That is a little bit out of the purview of this group. I know some of you are involved more with the with other, you know, other boards and groups. But yeah, of course it does have an effect, and municipal money would be helpful to build a road. But at this point, again, discussing whether or not employment is appropriate here at all is a discussion we maybe had and should have had at the comprehensive plan stage at that level. And our current comprehensive plan does identify that and all the things that go, you know, along with that, including development of this lot, requiring a road, are the current requirements. If that makes sense.
Yes, and then I have a follow-up. So the comprehensive plan, obviously, you know, a lot of effort went into that a couple of years ago, and it was developed at the height of our market. Obviously, we're in a very different market today. So typically, how do we handle this? And I just educate me on this. You know, comprehensive plans, if I understand, are meant to last 10, 20 years. And so how do we address it when the comprehensive plan misses it or the market changes and doesn't support the development of a piece of property?
Sure, great question. And Director Robinson can weigh in if he wants to, as he was the manager of that division for a number of years. But basically, the comprehensive plan window is 30 years. And the long-range planning team of the department tracks the benchmarks that are set out in the plan to see if it is being successful. And then they also track, as you're saying, you know, real life and how the expectations in the comprehensive plan may need to change, and then they could recommend changes to address those issues. So they work on that. And I don't think the recommendations will be yearly, but I do think they will be much more, I do think they will be more than maybe they have been in the past, just based on how they are tracking it right now. And then additionally, as I mentioned before, a member of the public who owns property or doesn't, any member of the public, I'm sure could recommend a comprehensive plan change. Because of the way this conversation keeps happening, or, you know, what we're kind of circling around with this particular request, it seems that may have been an appropriate way to go, to request that change first, and then a rezone based on that if council did decide to make the change to make this area more commercial, you know, to forecast more commercial here than employment.
All right. Any other questions? Commissioner Kinsey.
I had it in my notes from the last conversation that there was some interest by the Bloomington Economic Development Council to weigh in on this. And I don't know if any of those discussions occurred in the process of this period between the last and current.
We didn't get any specific comments from them between the last hearing and this one. At the previous hearing or prior to that, they had expressed concern for preserving employment uses and locations within the community. They noted that the amount of land for that use is not great. There is certainly significant amounts of land within the community that are allowed for commercial uses, restaurants, big box retail. The amount of land for employment uses that allow for businesses like Cook or Hoosier Energy, properties like that are very unique and should be preserved to help maintain those large employment uses. Which are essential to communities growing. We need a variety of land uses, not just for people to, purchase things, but also places for them to work. That's one of the unique aspects about this site is the size of it and the location that makes it very ideal for that type of use.
Thanks. I don't know if the petitioner has had further conversations with BEDC, but I'd be interested to hear that.
Brad?
Yeah, go ahead,
Okay.
Mr. Carmen.
Well, we have had, and I'm going to defer speaking for them because I think, hoping since I see on the screen that Clark's going to speak up for the BDC when this goes to public. So yes, and I have some other things I'd like to say, but I assume, Brad, you want to get through to the public and then come back for any final comments from petition, and I'll defer if that's what how you
yes,
want to proceed.
thank you. I think that would be most efficient. Any other questions from commissioners? I guess I've got one question, and maybe this is for staff, or I think the petitioner could weigh in on this as well. But I guess I need a little help understanding what the end game is here. It seems to me highly unlikely that if we forward this to council with a negative recommendation, that this ends up any other way than us seeing this again with some different proposal and different recommendation. I guess I'd like to hear from staff and the petitioner as to why it makes sense to forward this with a negative recommendation as opposed to changing the petition.
So,
Well,
sorry, go ahead, Eric.
So the petitioner, they filed a request to rezone the property. So the Planning Commission have 6 criteria that they need to evaluate the petition on that we made proposed findings for. That the petitioner can always withdraw the petition and file another petition that would include amending the comprehensive plan. If they wanted to include a subdivision request with that, then they could do that at that time. However, what the Planning Commission is evaluating tonight is the petition that is before them to rezone the entire property. And then make a recommendation to the Planning Commission based on the 6 criteria that are outlined in the UDO for what we are required to review a zoning map amendment for.
And then I'll just add, sorry, Mike, that we are in the process. We have, obviously released a draft zoning map. We are in the process of updating that, and then that will come out in the first quarter of 2021. And we, in the draft zoning map right now, we have recommended to rezone this property. So we will be recommending to rezone the property to ME. So that will, that is what would happen. So if you did recommend denial and council did either not hear it or, confirm that denial in a hearing, then yes, Eric's right. They could definitely consider other options, but we would be coming right behind with the rezone request to ME.
So there's not much expediency in pushing through a rezone to ME right now, because that's likely going to happen anyway. And so I suppose then for the petitioner, your hope is just that we will override the staff's recommendation and forward this with a positive recommendation. Is that accurate?
Yes. And as influential as I think your votes are, your recommendations may be to the council, I don't believe the council is a rubber stamp for your recommendations. And you can forward it with the recommendation for denial, and I will still go to the council with the belief that the council, on a policy decision, which is really what this is going to come down to, more of a policy decision, which is really their purview much more than yours, that we will get a good ear at the council, and that they'll give fair consideration to this MC zoning request, which tells me that it may well be approved, notwithstanding any negative recommendation you may make. This is not a test of the comp plan. The comp plan talks, first of all what you and the council are required to do is to give due regard to the comp plan. It all by itself is not a mandate on what's going to happen or not happen. It's a plan. A zoning change is one way to implement the plan. But the comp plan, while talking about employment-based zoning, did not define employment. It did not say only manufacturing uses of 50 employees or more, or 500 employees or more. Some of the uses in here, a contractor's yard is a permitted use in the MC, a conditional use in the ME, a contractor's yard is an employment use. Every one of those retail sites, which we are not pushing the retail sites, by the way, are employment uses. There's very little in the MC uses that are not also employment. They just aren't large-scale employment uses. But we're not going to get a cook to come in here and develop 100 acres. If we're holding Mr. Brown's ground up, waiting for Cook 2 or Cook Beta to come in here and build, Mr. Brown's going to be dead before that happens. And that's not right. That's not the purpose of zoning. So I would submit that we want you to make your recommendation. I would like it to be positive. I think it ought to be, but you'll make your decision on that. But this will go to the council, and I think council will give an ear to reasonable use, a reasonable zoning change that does not do harm to the comp plan. And I think it actually dovetails with it. Maybe not to the degree that staff would like, but it certainly dovetails with the employment-based zoning to allow the MC uses. So.
Thank you. Okay. If there aren't any other questions, I think it is time. Oh.
One question.
Oh, go ahead.
And that's this is something related with the information about changes since the first hearing that we have on page 42 regarding in our first hearing, the petitioner mentioned the possibility of restricting possible uses, and however, no proposal for restricting uses was given to the department. So I just wonder if there was any main reason and rationale since the last time that we heard this, and now there was any specific reason why there wasn't any document sent to the department?
Yes. Yeah. It's actually it's pretty straightforward. When that issue was raised last time, and I raised it, that you can do a zoning commitment to exclude certain uses, and I think specifically I mentioned big box retail, which is one of the permitted uses in the MC zone. Jackie was very frank on staff's disagreement with doing that. They don't like them, that she finds them hard to enforce. Things get forgotten, lost over time, was, I believe, her statements. We can disagree with that, but that was the staff's response to that. And in all honesty, there was not a member on this plan commission watching all your faces that I got the sense at all that that was something you're interested in entertaining. So we didn't pursue it, given the negative staff reaction to that and the lack of any facial feedback from anybody on the commission that was something you would like to consider. It can always be done. It can be done even now, but it was not done. That's why it was not done at this point. So.
Brad, if I may, since this now has come up twice, that is accurate. It's hard to administer, but it just, I think, again, we are kind of getting into little bitty details about possible changes. And of course, if you are favorable to the rezone request, then we do need to have those conversations. But I just want to make sure that we're remembering that the base is that that we don't agree that the district is as close to employment as Mr. Carmen is obviously arguing. Putting in a truck stop at this location it's not an employment generator. And opening these locations on this highway to those opportunities, I think, is something that was considered during the comprehensive plan, and why these areas weren't zoned commercial at that time. And I know that as people who live here, we sometimes say, oh, 69 and 37 are the same thing, but they are not the same thing. You know, a highway that directs, you know, directly connects us, you know, to it, they just aren't the same thing. So I do think the opportunities, though Mr. Carmen points out, you know, obviously this hasn't developed over time. I think to ignore that development opportunity increases because 169 is complete is inaccurate. And again, and also would like to point out, you know, it's not 100 acres. It's not even 87 acres. It's 40 something acres. You know, roughly half of it needs to be put away with environmental considerations. You know, we don't think Cook Jr.'s coming to town, but we do think as a community that some areas need to be identified for possible employment uses. And this area, this intersection of our, you know, at Fullerton and 69 is appropriate. Not because we don't, you know, respect or appreciate the property owner. It doesn't have anything to do with that. But just because of the characteristics of this area and how we see it developing out based on the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Jackie. I guess one follow-up to that procedurally is that would such a addition of use restrictions change the petition? In other words, if we were to forward this to council, would it be possible to add some restrictions at the council level or prior to the council's hearing of it, or would that require it to start the process over?
Mr. Rooker can weigh in, but I believe that the way the council does their reasonable conditions based on state law, that they could add those at that level. I don't think we would recommend, for example, if you recommended approval, Mr. Carmen wouldn't then come up with a list after and suggest it, you know, officially to council. It may come up in the hearings and have something worked out at that stage.
But he might have it in his back pocket if it seems like. I think
it's probably there, yes.
Mr. Rucker, would you like to weigh in on that?
Only to confirm what Jackie said.
Great, thank you. Okay, any other questions from commissioners before we go to public comment? All right, seeing none, we're going to public comment now. And again, if you want to make comment on this petition, the thing to do is at the bottom of your screen, click that participants tab and then click on the raise hand button. I see one already. If for some reason you have trouble with that, please do turn your camera on and raise your real hand and we'll try to recognize you as best that we can. Jackie will recognize you when it is your turn to speak, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to give your comment. And
Mark, you should be set to go.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Clark Greiner. I'm the Business Development Director for the BEDC. And I wanted to go ahead and just make a brief statement on this. The BEDC, you know, has reviewed the zoning petition by Bill C. Brown Trust requesting a rezone of the Fullerton Pike PUD to mixed use. We support zoning flexibility, and we want to work that works for the property, that enables the development to benefit the community. In addition, the BED supports maintaining an adequate inventory of land zoned for employment use and development. The Fullerton Pike PUD has been in place for more than 30 years and has listed uses that are comparable to the ME uses right now. And the property hasn't developed, as Mr. Carmen has identified and pointed out. And you know, we're aware that subdivisions and developments of the property will include a dedicated through street connecting Fullerton Pike and the medical park to the north end of that PUD. And we understand that there's a tremendous cost of putting that road in. So the BED supports the rezoning that preserves the employment-based uses, but adds mixed-use flexibility where other uses would be compatible as part of the overall mixed-use development, and which development would also be the impetus to fund the cost of that road. Regulating the Fullerton Pike PUD area remains for limited use, may leave it dormant, and I guess our concern is this a deterrent to future development. So mixed use is not only an attractive way for new employment-based development, but also mixed use could help fund the cost of construction of the road, which we think is essential to attract new development for employment-based uses. And I think one of the other things that we'd like to point out too is that, you know, Mr. Cochran pointed out that the market has changed substantially. The people that we talk to out there in the marketplace are also talking about office space and maybe some of the pullback on that. We certainly want to be mindful of that and also make sure that a property can be developed in a cost-effective way that benefits the community. Thank you, and that's the end of my statement.
Thank you. Jackie, do we have any other?
I don't see any others. Let me check Facebook real quick. No, there's nothing there either. Oh, wait. I see one, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. Dave, you can go ahead. You should be unmuted, Dave.
Sounds like maybe we're having some technical difficulty here. If we're having trouble with a microphone, feel free to post your comments in the chat, and I'll be happy to read them into the record and for the public to hear if you're unable to get audio going there. We'll wait just a minute and see if there are any other hands.
Oh, he's good, I think. He said he's okay.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I just got a question. I'm so sorry. It said he was okay. Hold on. All right. I'll just read aloud what he said. Dave Askins, I am just hoping somebody might clarify what can happen and what must happen if this petition is forwarded to the city council with a recommendation of denial. As I understand it, city council is not required to act on the plan commission's recommendation. And if the council just ignores this for 90 days, then the denial stands. But the city council could decide to take up the question and either affirm the denial or decide it different from the plan commission and go ahead and grant the petition. I'm hoping to get confirmation of understanding, assuming, yes, that is accurate. Assuming that's right, here's a question. If the city council were to decide differently from the plan commission, would it have to come back to the plan commission for comment like the UDO, or would the city council's action end things? I believe city council's action ends the process in a rezone. Mike Rooker can weigh in, or Mike Carmen could not. I'm sure someone knows more than I do about that.
Jackie, let me double check the statutes real quick. If we can be patient for about maybe 120 seconds, I'll have an answer for you.
Thank you.
I'll tell you what, I will make sure we come back to that. I'll give you a chance to look that up. And if there are no other public comments, let's go on back to the commission, and I think we'll entertain a motion at this time. Is there anyone ready to make a motion? Or do we want to wait to hear Mr. Rooker's response before we make one? Yes, Commissioner.
I don't want to make a motion, but I want to understand. I want to make sure that I understand our choices here. So one choice is to forward it on as the staff has recommended to the city council with a recommendation for denial. The other would be to turn around and forward with a recommendation to approve, but with some conditions that would omit certain types of activities from that MC rezone parcel if we conclude that there are some activities that shouldn't be on there. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, we could also forward this to the council with no recommendation. That's also an option. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can forward it. Mike, I'm sure would say this if I didn't. You could just forward it with a positive recommendation as well. I mean, just to be clear what the options are.
Right.
with
Oh,
no
yes, thank you.
caveats. Yes.
Right.
If
yeah.
you decide to forward it with a positive recommendation, I think, I mean, you would obviously have to add some findings, because our findings support a negative recommendation, I believe.
Right. Well, and then I guess my next question
And
is,
then the list as well, yeah.
yeah, the list. And is there actually a list that is in fact agreed between you, Mr. Carmen, and staff?
No, and I don't know that we would necessarily need to itemize a list at this point. I think we could probably forward it with a recommendation that that was a little bit more broadly worded and encouraging council to adopt only once additional restrictions were agreed to. I don't know that we would have to necessarily spell them out at this point. But I would, I guess, defer that question to Mr. Rooker as well.
You can send it on that way. I'll just speak for him real quickly, but he can correct me. Obviously, you know, our preference of running this commission and, you know, validating its decisions would be that you would send a full package to them instead of deferring for them to, you know, make the final decision. But I mean, obviously, because of how they do reasonable conditions, they can change whatever, you know, they would be able to change it either way. Our preference would be similar to the last one, that we send, you know, a fleshed out, agreed upon package.
And
Yeah, I think.
just to,
Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Rooker.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Whistler. Just to confirm, in the event that the proposal receives either no recommendation or an unfavorable recommendation from the Plan Commission, it does not come back to the Plan Commission after the City Council considers it. If the City Council fails to act for 90 days, then the proposal is defeated, or the City Council can adopt it or reject the request. Those are the only options.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Sandberg.
Thank you. This is an unusual position for me to be in, because it seems to me that if we're following the recommendations of the planning staff based on what our parameters are, we would then recommend it going to the City Council with a negative recommendation. My other hat that I wear, being on the City Council and hearing from the BEDC and the fact that we are coming through a very difficult time, with much prone to want to add as much flexibility as we possibly can to all kinds of employment opportunities, whether it's large, whether it's small. And of course, our land is precious, and we have to designate land in a way that makes sure that we can develop the kinds of projects that the community needs. But I'm feeling very, very torn in that I'm wanting a little more flexibility here. And I'm hoping that the City Council, if we do send this along with a negative recommendation, won't just dismiss it out of hand without having this policy discussion about, is employment centers, are employment centers really going to be critical to the future health of this community? And how can we be as flexible as possible with the developers and the landowners in making sure we get the absolute best kind of development there as we possibly can, with no restrictions that would hamper them? Or what's bothering me is the fact that this land has gone fallow for 35 years. And with land being at such a premium, having nothing there does nothing for our community either. So between a rock and a hard place here, but I think the Plan Commission kind of has its work cut out for us in terms of just the letter of the law again. But I'm hopeful that, again, City Council won't just dismiss it. And of course, Mr. Carmen is expecting me to do marvelous things by authorizing the funding to build roads and all kinds of infrastructure that would be make everything shovel ready. I'm one of 9, Mr. Carmen. I don't have that kind of authority.
You are one.
But I am one, and I do try to think through these things very thoughtfully and carefully, and not just dismiss things without having the nuanced discussions that I think they deserve. And you've made some valid points. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Commissioner Cochran.
So Jackie or Eric or Mike, I agree with you on sending a proposal if we decided to, ask for approval with or recommend approval with restrictions. What is that process for us to create a package for them instead of just punting it to the city council?
It would be Mr. Carmen and the department coming to an agreement about what uses they want to restrict, and then they would propose a zoning commitment with those restrictions in it.
Gotcha.
So you would be able to see what those were. If there were some that we were at odds about, you could discuss those. And then when it went to council, it would be that the plan commission was going against staff approval, and here's why, and this is what strict restrictions you thought were appropriate.
And it's your recommendation to, if the majority decides to go that route, to have those discussions before it goes through to city council.
Yes.
Correct.
So, yeah, so I guess if the majority of the commission wanted to take that route, I think, would you agree, Jackie, that our best option would be to continue this to our next meeting, to give an opportunity to come up with that list of restrictions?
Yes, that would be my recommendation. Yes.
Mr. Carmen,
Hold on,
would you
he muted himself? Let me unmute him.
have any objection to that if that were the desire of a majority of the commission?
Yes and no. I'd rather see this move on than having come back another month. But at the same time, that anything to do to help.
So to the point then, you would prefer we forward it tonight with a negative recommendation?
No.
And we forward it a month from now with a positive recommendation?
No, I think that you could trust your staff to work with us to identify those uses that are particularly onerous from their perspective that are otherwise allowed in MC, so that the staff could do that without bringing it back to you. I would trust the staff to work on that with us.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? I think, yes, Commissioner Sandberg.
And then given what Mr. Carmen said, then the staff, when this goes to the city council, and once again, it's going to go to the land use committee first, I'm assuming, since this is PUD, that those conditions, if you will, would already be in place for their consideration. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I have one question, and that is regarding the reasons why, if we are recommending or if we are sending this to the council, as far as I understood, Jackie, so we will need to write down a reason why we are sending this with the negative assessment from the department. So I wonder who is going to be in charge, and how can we define those reasons that we are mentioning?
Okay, so in the packet now, right, I believe it's 6 findings Eric said for a rezone, and those are set out by ordinance, and you have to find that they're true. So we have not found that they're true. That's why we're recommending denial. So then this body would then look at those 6, and we would help, of course, with that. Staff would help and recommend findings for does that make sense?
So would it involve like an extra meeting for that? But because how can we get together and determine, like, our position would be that we found different information from the department. So that would be something that we need to arrange, or
what we would probably do. Okay, so you all will, for example, someone will make a motion. If someone moves, for example, to continue, assuming 5 or more of you think that it should get a positive recommendation, which I'm sure you'll discuss here shortly, someone would move to the hearing to move the petition to be heard again in January. You would discuss why you think it meets those findings, and then staff would prepare draft findings for that packet, that meeting packet for you. We will not change our recommendation, but we can assist you, and would also then work with Mr. Carmen on the exclusions. So that would all come out in the January packet. Were 5 or more of you to think it appropriate to zone this commercial.
Sorry, can I just ask one clarifying question on that, Jackie? So I thought I heard somewhere in the last few minutes the possibility that we voted to send this off for you and Mr. Carmen to work out that list, and then to have it not come back to the commission, but at that point to go on to city council. Is that not an option, or
no? Mr. Worker can chime in, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe for a rezone, rezones are different than some of the other petitions they see, and it needs, I'm not sure how much they can change a petition for rezone. So I think, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, just to jump in, that's accurate. It's not like a text amendment, which I think is what the council is probably familiar with, or what other people think about sometimes. You can't amend it and send the proposal back. It's with a rezone request, the council's role is simply to approve what comes to them from the PC, or to deny what comes to them from the PC, or just to take no action, in which case the Plan Commission's action stands.
So what I said before was inaccurate about the reasonable conditions. They can't add reasonable conditions on a rezone. So we will want to address this at this level, I believe. Is that what you're saying, Mike?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Thank you, Jackie.
Apologies. So yes, we do need to address it at this level. The reasonable conditions that they use to and other types of petitions for a straight rezone request, they cannot add those.
So so in that case, with this change, it would go if there is the recommendation to go to the council with the negative assessment, we won't have to make any addition. We won't have to make any rationale for that, but it will go with the positive endorsement by this commission, even though it's negative from the department, right?
Correct.
So the only way, the only way that this gets that the rezone is granted with exclusions is if we author a specific list of those exclusions before we pass it along to council.
Correct. Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Well, given that, it seems to me that we really have two options. We can, well, I guess we still have three options, but if what I'm hearing is correct, we can either just forward this with the negative recommendation. We can and just let the petitioner take his chances with council just moving it along without any restrictions, or we can delay. It doesn't seem practical to me that we're going to hash out that specific list tonight in the course of this meeting. And it's certainly not something I want to try to do on the fly here. So I think, you know, the potential motions here are forward with a negative recommendation, continue to the January meeting with the recommendation to staff that they, or to the petitioner that they come back at that meeting with a list of exclusions that we could add, or we just forward it on with a positive recommendation. I think those are the options in front of us. So looks like Commissioner Kinsey has another question.
I have one more point that I feel is getting a little bit lost in our conversation here, and it is about, I just want to confirm that as much as we've not talked about the conditions that permit uses that are close to what the MC allows. We talked about the restaurant size and multiple restaurants, and we talked about hotel as conditional, that those are conditional uses. And I just don't want to lose the fact that we do have provisions in the EM and ME classifications in that align with the comprehensive plan that would allow these different uses. They're conditional, I realize that, and there's no guarantee that they would be approved, but it does afford some consideration for those uses in those designations. So it makes me wonder why we have conditional status on things if now we're going to resort to use restrictions as a policy. And it gives me great pause to start to enact new policy when we have this comp plan that has clearly, that we signed on to, that we reviewed, that we are now really considering, that has affordances for conditional use, and we're not willing to try it. And it gives me great pause in trying to make a lot of things, because I'd like to think that if those are conditional, that's true, and that we could consider it thoroughly. So I guess that's my pause here. I want to see this property, developed if that's what it should be, but I'd also like to give a chance for the comp plan and the UDO and those designations a chance. So that's, I guess I'm stating a position, but I also want to make clear that that is still true.
Thank you. Yes, that is true. One thing is we don't have anymore, though, is use variances, right? So that would be limited to those things that are listed as conditional uses. So that gives some flexibility, but not as much as we might have had previously. Any other questions or comments or a motion? Commissioner Kate.
Yeah, I will just a comment first, which is I'm also a little bit sort of torn here between, on the one hand, feeling as though what has been described as the desired development may well be able to be accommodated in what we already have. And on the other hand, agreeing with what Susan suggested before, which is, the ability to have flexibility, particularly at this time, feels extremely important in terms of developing a property. And we've heard from the BEDC on this too, to be able to make a go of this property, which has sort of sat there for quite some time. I don't know that I'm entirely persuaded that what Petitioner wants can't be done within the confines of our existing UDO, but it seems, and the comp plan, but it seems like, and what we're effectively talking about is sending this away for another round of trying to figure that question out. That is staff sitting down with Mr. Carmen and saying, okay, what is it that is inconsistent with our understanding of what we're looking for in this ME zone? And are you willing to agree that the following things are not going to be part of this if we rezone it to MC? And that seems, like although I hate generally to kind of keep pushing projects off, and Mr. Carmen can decide what he wants to do, I guess, but that seems like it would be worthwhile perhaps to try to get some clarification of whether there really is the ability to come to terms there. So I guess my motion, I'll make a motion to, oh God, what are we doing? So I'll make a motion to continue this and to, we're really not, we're denying it with the understanding that I mean, we're continuing, well, what we're doing, yeah, I don't know. We're so conditionally approving if there can be agreement, but we're really just continuing.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the only option, if we want to try to attach some conditions to this, and I think practically speaking, if we want to add any flexibility here, that's our only option, because it seems that the council does not have the authority to amend it once it gets to them. This is only my personal opinion, but the likelihood of council approving something that would allow a truck stop to be built there seems very low. And so if we want to add some flexibility, our only option is to continue this and specify exactly what that flexibility is at our next meeting.
Okay, well, I move to continue to our next meeting so that those continued discussions can occur.
I'll second that.
Just to, I don't know if I can ask you after the second, but so the definition of continuing this would be having the information that we expect for the next meeting from Dr. Carmen and colleagues. Is that the motion on the floor right now on the second?
Yes, the motion is to continue this to our January hearing. And I think we've made it pretty clear that if this wants to move forward, we're going to have to see some specific commitments from the petitioner as to which restrictions he's willing to commit to as deed restrictions.
Well, and actually that's my question, because I maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm incorrect, but I heard, and Mr. Carmen, you can help me here, that this option is not the option because you would like to go to the council even if it's negative. You are not committed to do these changes for the next meeting. Is that something that I heard, Mr. Carmen?
I think he's.
I think I'm muted, so I can talk now. Okay.
Yeah.
No, actually, we're getting two different things crossed. I'm sorry. Last meeting, I raised the issue of restrictions, zoning commitments that would restrict certain uses, and I was commenting that really got no play and opposition from staff. I also commented that my sense of reaction by the Plan Commission members watching was that there was just in the Plan Commission to entertain that as an issue. What I'm hearing tonight is a little bit different now, that is something you would entertain. So that changes the dynamics from my perspective of something now to look at closer. Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, so we do have a motion and a second. Let's quickly just make our final comment here. I think maybe if you could just briefly try to summarize whether this is something you want to see, and if there's anything specific that you'd like to see in these restrictions, I think now would be the time to say it. So let's go to final comment. Go ahead, Commissioner Sandberg.
Thank you. Yeah, I would be willing to continue to work on this. I was going to give Mr. Carmen his first wish and just go ahead and recommend the sending it to council with the denial and take your chances with them. But I think this makes it probably more likely for them to pick it up as a debate if we at least put some thought into this between now and January. So I will be supporting the motion to continue. Thank you.
Commissioner St. John.
I agree. I supported what Commissioner Sandberg said earlier. I don't think we're setting a new policy here. I don't really like going against staff's recommendation because I value their perspective, but everything's different now. And I know the comprehensive plan and the UDO and it's all new. Everything is different. The whole slate is different. The way we work is different. So I see this really as a point in time decision. I don't see it as setting a whole new, changing all the rules and moving forward. It will always be done this way. I just think it's a response to what's going on in the world. And I would encourage Mr. Carmen to work really hard with staff to get this worked out, this list, because then we can move it forward. And I know you'll do your best, and I encourage you to. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other final comments? Commissioner Copper.
I was just going to note, appreciate and respect the other opinions expressed. I still have some concerns, kind of echoing staff's about creating a list and basically cutting pieces out of one zoning instead of using another. So I'll personally be voting no on the continuance.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Cochran.
I was fortunate to be a part of conversations when when I-69 was being developed. And this piece of property was really identified as had a lot of great potential for the use that it currently is. However, it's not been developed in 30 years. It went through the height of our market through 18, 19. I think Section 5 was done in October of 18. So it's been battle tested on the market and still with the current uses, still undeveloped. So I support looking at adding some additional uses to this property. So,
Commissioner Kinsey.
I'll just state my concern again for not allowing this to go through the process of testing the conditional use issues. I respect the fact that the world has changed and that things are different. So that's the only thing persuading me right now to offer any sort of consideration on this one. But I really feel like adding a lot of restricted uses and deed restrictions is not the way to go as a policy on this kind of property. And with the BEDC, I would like to see some real employment consideration given. And it concerns me to do this, but if that's the will of the group, we can give it a go.
Thank you. Commissioner Kate.
Yeah, I guess I would just encourage that discussion with Mr. Carmen and staff to dive into what Commissioner Kinsey is saying and whether, in fact, it can be accommodated, what you're looking to do can be accommodated with the existing comp plan, the existing conditional use opportunities and approvals, as opposed to going down the road of achieving the flexibility in this other way. So I really see this as a conversation to try to fully flesh out what is it we're looking for, the we on both sides, and is there a prospect of getting that done without this rezone? And if there isn't, then just being very clear on what shouldn't be in that rezone and why.
Thank you. Any other final comments? Okay, yeah, I will support this. I think this is not the end of the issue, though. We probably need to take a really good look at these zones, and even at the comprehensive plan. I mean, it was said earlier that we shouldn't expect another cook to come develop a property like this. We couldn't even expect the actual cook to develop a property like this ever again. The whole world has changed, and the days of big companies building big properties to house hundreds of employees is in the past. And so we need to adjust our policies to reflect that new reality. So I will support this primarily out of expediency, because I don't think it's fair to say, that the petitioner should wait for us to go back and change our comp plan and our zoning codes. But we need to do that. I think that's pretty clear. And so I'd like to see this move along, but I'd like to see us fix this for every petitioner, not just on a one-off basis. So, any other final comments before we call the roll?
Whistler.
Yes.
Copper.
100, and the case manager is Ryan Rubley. Ryan, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
All right, take it away.
All right, thank you. There we go. This petition is for the property located on the intersection of East 3rd Street and South State Road 446. It's 10.097 acres. It's currently zoned within 2 PUDs, PUD 70, which is Century Village, and PUD 21, which is Baker Stevens. The portion of these PUDs that are within are highlighted are being considered for the rezone. The portions outside of the highlighted areas will remain within their respective PUDs. The surrounding uses here include commercial and multifamily to the north, multifamily to the south. There's a communication tower and hotel on the remaining portion of PUD 70 to the east, and commercial uses which will remain in the PUD 21 to the west. So the petitioner seeking a zoning map amendment to rezone roughly 10 acres from PUD to mixed use corridor. Just a brief history of the site. Century Village was originally approved in 1975 and expanded in 2004. The original PUD only allowed for a mixture of limited commercial uses. When the PUD expanded in 2004, it also allowed for a maximum of 50 upper floor dwelling units. The Baker Stevens PUD was approved in 1984 and remained largely unchanged, allowing for a mixture of commercial units. The comprehensive plan has identified this petition site as 2 future land use areas. The comprehensive plan is aware that this may occur and allows for a best suited designation to be identified and used during reviews for zoning map amendments. The department believes that due to the location along 2 major corridors, that the urban corridor best suits these parcels. That's the one in the red there. So the urban corridor has several intense goals, features, etc., including transforming urban corridor areas away from strip retail and toward more urban mixed-use designs, integrating multifamily residential uses into existing commercial uses or areas, uses that take advantage to the proximity to other land uses, more intense land uses, as well as lower use or lower density neighborhood retail or neighborhood uses, as well as urban services. The area should incorporate mixture of uses and increased activity. Buildings within the district should be developed with a minimal street setback, parking located behind buildings, and an emphasis on minimizing pedestrian obstacles. The area is also suited for higher density residential and commercial uses and should allow for taller building heights. This is the mixed use corridor purpose statement. It just says that medium scale developments with a mixture of storefront retail, professional offices, and or residential dwelling units along arterial and collector corridors at a scale larger than the neighborhood mixed use neighborhood zoning district. So site plans are not required as part of a zoning map amendment, as you now know. However, the petitioner has included a conceptual site plan in order to give an idea of what the site could be developed with in the future. Rezoning the site to MC rezoning the site to MC would allow for any of the uses in the MC district to be established as long as it meets district standards. The petitioner has shown a conceptual site plan which could support 5 buildings, 3 residential and 1 mixed use along 3rd, and 1 large self-storage use on the southern portion of the lot there. The conceptual site plan would provide, or is showing a mixture of 1 and 2 bedroom units for a total of 164 units. Here is a conceptual elevation of the potential multi-family building. here's the conceptual elevation of the self-service storage area. In conclusion, the PUD, portions of the PUD which are proposed to be rezoned have been largely undeveloped since 1975, with the exception of some surface level parking areas. The comprehensive plan gives guidance and supports a mixture of uses, including higher density multifamily uses along major corridors. The property fronts along 2 major corridors here in East 3rd and State Road 446. The MC district allows for a variety of commercial and residential uses and closely aligns with the goals of the urban corridor designation of the comprehensive plan. The MC district would allow for a variety of expanded uses, most notably multifamily along a heavily traveled portion of the city. With a zoning map amendment, the commission is supposed to review and make recommendations on the following. The comprehensive plan designates that these properties as urban corridor and neighborhood residential. The comprehensive plan acknowledges that lines of future land use map are intended to be fluid, and that with petition sites span multiple designations, the best suited designation should be identified with the petition details and surroundings. The petition includes 5 parcels under single ownership that front along 2 major corridors within the city. Therefore, urban corridor designation is believed to be the one that most aligns with the petition site. The comprehensive plan gives guidance to land use decisions in the urban corridor area that include mixed use developments, heights, intensities higher than that of the smaller, less intense areas of the city. The MC district purpose is to accommodate medium scale developments with mix of storefront, retail, professional, and residential dwellings along arterial and collector corridors. And the MC district is the base zoning district that most closely aligns with the intent of the goal of urban corridor areas in the comprehensive plan in this area. The site is undeveloped and is in prime location for a mixture of commercial and residential uses with direct access to 2 major corridors. The proximity to both major area commercial uses and multifamily and single family areas make this an ideal location for a mixed use development. The most desirable use for the land is to follow the recommendation of the comprehensive plan, which calls for commercial, higher density, residential, and a mixed use development throughout the urban corridor. The MC district intent was to allow for a variety of commercial and residential uses to be developed throughout the urban corridor, and the standards and allowed uses within the MC district allow for the most desirable uses in this area. Properties currently have a tree preservation area on the southeast portion of the site. The area of the site was set aside during the rezone to PUD. Condition of approval has been included, which will further ensure that the tree preservation area is maintained in perpetuity. The rezoning to these portions of the PUD to MC are not anticipated to have any negative impacts on the adjacent property values throughout the jurisdiction. The rezoning to of this property to MC would allow for mixed use developments along 2 major corridors. The MC district was intended to allow for a mixture of uses, including multifamily residential uses along major corridors. And the comprehensive plan again has identified that this area is ideal for that mixture of uses. And finally, with that, based on the findings of the report, the department recommends that this petition be forwarded to Common Council with a positive recommendation and waiving the required second hearing with the following condition: a tree preservation easement shall be confirmed by a survey and recorded in the Monroe County Recorder's Office as a recordable commitment, and the easement shall be in compliance with the UDO easement standards, including but not limited to signage. And I can answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Is there a representative of the petitioner who would like to continue the presentation? Mr. Carmen.
Thank you. Well, we'll keep this a little bit lower key than the last one, and be a lot briefer, I hope. But I need to clarify a couple points. And we think of this Century Village as the entire PUD as being rezoned with a couple little carve-outs, which I'll explain. What Ryan is focused on is that part of the Century Village PUD that has not developed. Because the entire PUD includes the Century Suites, which are condominiums, basically transient rental type use. It has professional office building. It has an office building that's really the radio station, WB, and its offices. Has the communication tower. It has what some of us older timers still think of as Chapman's Restaurant. It's been gone for a number of years, and there's been successors in there, but restaurants have been hit hard as throughout the community and elsewhere. So it has a banquet facility in there. So there are other mixed uses in there that are all part of this Century Village PUD. The area that we focused on in terms of the rezoning really was the whole PUD with a couple carve-outs. But what Ryan has shown you was really that undeveloped portion of it. And that's where the conceptual site plans came in. Didn't see a purpose to offering a as-built plan for that part that's really already developed, but that is part of this PUD. Now, staff, I believe that this is one of those PUDs that's on the staff-initiated rezoning, and I believe the recommendation for this PUD was MC anyway by staff. So we're consistent there and compatible with what we're trying to do. So I want to explain, and by the way, on the conceptual site plan, it is a tug of war. I heard Jackie in the first petition this evening talking about, a site plan is not required, but, historically, you, council, want to see what's coming or what might come as part of your consideration of rezoning. And I think that still remains true, even though site plans are not technically a requirement of a zoning petition. So we offered up the site plan, and it is a very rough one, but it is pretty representative of the type of what we think would be developed here, because we have an end user. We have someone identified who wants to do this. So that's pretty close. But if you took any hard look at the conceptual site plan, you'll see there are some deficiencies in it. Those will be development plan issues. I mean, the landscape plan is inadequate. The number of parking spaces and lack of tree islands in some of the parking areas, those are all development plan issues. So I don't want to mislead that was a carved in stone conceptual plan even. So it's just roughly represented to give you an idea of what we'd look to multiple building development to come out of this. But the carve-outs, I do want to make clear, there's a letter in your packet from Sound Management, LLC. Sound Management owns WB radio station. They own the lot that office building's on. It has to be lot 1 in this PUD, Century Village Phase 6, lot 1, I think it was. But it is that building and the small area, very relatively small area that is actually leased by Sound Management for the radio broadcast tower that's there were carved out because a rezone in the PUD, those were developed and that state radio tower was constructed because it was a permitted use in the current PUD. If we go to the MC zone, which we are requesting, the radio tower, broadcast tower, the communication facility becomes a conditional use. We do not have the ability to rezone land contrary to Sound Management LLC's desires because we don't own that lot. They were not willing to join into the petition. I understand why. They made that very clear in the letter they've submitted to planning that Ryan has included in the packet, that they could not see a reason why they should join a petition to rezone the PUD to MC when that would take their use from a permitted use to a conditional use. And I understand that. So it's not that they're in opposition to the MC zoning, but in terms of the application of it to that tower is problematic. That's actually something I think you and the council are going to have to debate a little bit, because I believe the staff will come forward continue with petition to rezone the rest of the PUD to MC anyway. And so that's going to be an issue you're going to confront and have to debate at a later time. It was not necessary to be part of this petition tonight to have that debate. Sound Management at this point is just not joining in this petition, but we'd like to move forward anyway. So their lots, the lot 1 that they own and the leased area for this tower communication facility, the tower, were carved out of not being part of this petition. So leaving those as part of the PUD for another day, for another consideration, asking to move forward then on this MC zoning. We believe it is consistent, and Ryan has, I think, covered those issues very well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners for staff or for the petitioner at this point?
Yeah,
Commissioner Kinsey.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying the radio station stake. It wasn't clear by the letter kind of what their opposition was, but clearly it's not opposition. It's just concern about jeopardizing their own status of the ability to have the tower there. So that makes sense. Staff, do you have any comment about that? Do you have concerns about that? Does it make any sense to, make an exception for that now, or acknowledge that that might be a grandfathered use or permitted use later? I don't know what your stake is on that.
No, so staff has no stake. They weren't included in this petition just by misunderstanding between the petitioner's representative, Mr. Carmen, and I. So they're completely removed from the petition. So long term, potentially, but they will be a conditional use. It's already on the property, so it'd be lawful non-conforming. They wouldn't have future issues. They wouldn't have had issues. I don't believe if they would have come in under this. It's just something that they didn't see as something they wanted to do.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just follow up, Ryan, for clarification? I just want to make sure I understood what you just said. So are you saying that because they are not part of this petition, their status is not changing, or that they're going to be conditional use no matter what?
Correct. Post this petition, they will not change. They were excluded as well as any of the developed portions of the Century Village PUD. So those weren't included in the petition, so they won't be affected by this petition. They can remain under the old PUD's rules where they are not a conditional use until potentially they are changed in a few months. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any additional questions? All right, if there's no more questions, I think it's time to go to public comment. Once again, if you'd like to make public comment, click on that participants tab at the bottom and click on the raise hand button. I believe that Mr. Ruebling has taken over the duties here of recognizing our speakers. So if you raise your hand, Ryan will recognize you and you'll have 5 minutes to speak. I'm not seeing anyone so far.
There's no one on the Facebook either.
Okay. Last call for public comment. Going once. Going twice. All right, we are back to the commission for any final questions, comments, or a motion. As a reminder, the recommendation from staff was to forward this to the Common Council with a positive recommendation and waiving the second hearing with one condition of approval, that a tree preservation easement shall be confirmed by survey and recorded in the Monroe County Recorder's Office as a recordable commitment, and the easement will be in compliance with Unified Development Ordinance easement standards, including but not limited to signage.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second that mirrors the staff recommendation in the packet exactly. Is there any final comment? Well, this is too easy. All right, let's just call the roll.
Okay. Sandberg.
Yes.
Ferreira.
Yes.
Kinsey.
Yes.
Burrell.
Yes.
Kate.
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
St. John.
Yes.
Cockrum.
Yes.
Copper.
Yes.
All right, 9-0.
That passes 9-0, and that is our final agenda item this evening. Thank you all for your patience and hope everyone just has a very safe and happy holidays. We'll see you all next year.